You are on.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the work session of Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, August 10th, 2020, approximately 1 p.m. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we're going to have Jennifer Martinez from our communications office share with us the pet of the week.
All right, that's right, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, members of council. Let me find my presentation here. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right, is it available yet?
No. Well, how about if we go to jobs? Oh, wait a minute. There he is. There's Zeke.
Okay. Today, Mayor, I'd like to introduce you to Zeke. Zeke is the dog this week. Last week, Zeke was a cat and spelled a little bit differently. This Zeke is spelled Z-E-E-K. He has the perfect can-do attitude. He is strong, energetic, and perfect for a family looking to stay physically fit all year long. Whether you're looking for an early morning or nightly jog, Zeke is happy to join you. All right. If you'd like to adopt Zeke, you're asked to go to the Animal Service Center of Mesilla Valley. The website that you will be going to is ascmv.org. You'll take a look at some of the pets there. If you're looking for Zeke, he has a specific number. You will be asked to call 3820018 to make an appointment to meet Zeke. Right now, all of the offsite adoption events are canceled until further notice. There are, of course, limitations at the Animal Service Center. Again, one is that you will need to make an appointment before you go in. Again, the website, ascmv.org/adoptions. Today, another warm day on the way. Summer weather and pets tips is what I'll be talking about. Never leave pets outside for long periods of time. Provide them water and shade. Keep them from rusting on concrete. Groom them regularly. Exercise when it's cooler, like in the morning or in the evening. And then, of course, if you're able to, provide cool or frozen treats. And again, the communications office always gives a little tip about COVID. Right now, if you go to COVID-19loscruces.com, that is the website that we have dedicated to all things COVID related. The New Mexico Department of Health and testing partners assure that tests are available to all those who are in need. They do ask, however, that the people that get to the front of the line are those who are symptomatic, those who are in close contact of infected people, and people who are scheduled for surgery. If you're not sure whether you should be tested right now, you can call the New Mexico Department of Health hotline. That is 855-600-3453. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, and then if you all recall our last council meeting, Dr. Payades was talking about a new introduction. It's called Jobs of the Week. I don't know if he's going to be doing that. I see that he's on the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, how are you, members of the City Council? Let me introduce you to Darlene Lopez. She is the one-stop operator with New Mexico Workforce Connections, and she's the person that will be presenting this to you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. This is Darlene Lopez. And I'll be presenting on Jobs of the Week.
Okay, thanks.
So for this week, we have Youth Program Specialist with the City of Las Cruces. That job will be closing on 8/10 of 20. We have Dialysis Registered Nurse. The U.S. Renal Care Inc. closes on 8/10 as well. Let me see. I think there are multiple positions on that one. Financial Accountant, Amador Health Center closes until filled. Well, it is open until filled. Security Analyst, there is one. This is for one Ignite Fueling Innovation, Inc., and this is also open until filled. A baker for Let Them Eat Cake closes. This is an until filled position as well. An auto technician / mechanic for LC Auto Doctors, and this one is also open until filled. For a full list of jobs, internships, and volunteer opportunities, you can visit employnm.com or governmentjobs.com/career/Las Cruces as well to find more opportunities. And then we also have our next slide here that has the local workforce office contact information. The phone number is 575-524-6250. This is located on 226 South Alameda Boulevard here in Las Cruces. If you need any assistance with employment and job posting resources. I will stand for any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Darlene. So are you going to be doing this every week or just during our work sessions, which are the second and fourth Mondays of the month?
Actually, I'll defer to Francisco for that question.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, Francisco Payares for the record. It is every week. So you'll have it just like the pet of the week. Very quickly, in about 2 minutes, we're going to be showing you some snippets of jobs that are available for our community and people where to get those jobs at. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You said you're going to be showing that right now? A snippet?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was the snippet, actually.
Oh,
those
okay.
jobs that are open, correct.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, wow, you have more. Okay.
No, that is. Of course, there's more to mention.
Kind of cutting out there, Dr. Payares, but I think.
Yeah, that was it though. That was their snippet, and we'll be here each week with new jobs, and hopefully we'll see those fall off as they get filled.
Okay, so do you go by Amara or?
No. Sorry, it's the kiddos are involved with some of these summer youth camps, and they're having to use my Zoom. So
I gotcha.
I need to change it. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Just want to make sure I got the name right. Okay, Darlene, well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for that. This is a good service. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we have 2 items on the agenda. 3.1 is the intervention support, and it looks like Mayor Pro Tem Gondara is going to actually lead this off. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor, if I may, 2 things. Dr. Joe Velasquez is having trouble getting on. I just sent Adrian an email to send the Zoom information to them. David Maestas, it didn't get to her or to the group, to INET Med. And secondly, in the spirit of transparency, I do want to say that Joe Velasquez is a friend and a colleague. She contributed $200 to my campaign. And so I wanted to say that publicly. And so, Mayor, I don't know if you feel that's a conflict.
No, not at all. You know, if you'd like, we can go ahead and go to the next item, and then we can always come back after we finish the community development commercial fee schedule, and then by that time, everything should be ready to go.
Sounds good, Mayor. I think that'll work.
Okay,
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and move to item 3.2, the community development commercial fee schedule. And looks like Mr. Larry Nichols and Dr. Tim Pitts will be the co-host, I guess.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. Larry Nichols, Community Development Director, and the Budget Office. We will have a presentation today with you to further discuss the building fees for the commercial and the trade fees. These will represent, in some cases, increase. And as explained in the presentation further, some of them did not change. And in a couple of cases, even a few lesser fees than the increase. The last 2 years, we have been working with updating our plans, our codes, our fees. A number of them have not been updated for several years. In some cases, 14 years, 20 years, and those timeframes. Recently, the plan updates that we have included were the Elevate Las Cruces comp plan, That was about 10 years before it had been updated, and we now have it. Thank you very much for helping us get that implemented and allow it to work with in our development. The active transportation plan is another example of an update of a plan that we had recently. Codes, we've been updating codes and commissions and boards. An example of that would be the Historical Preservation Commission. And in progress right now, we're reviewing the zoning code that had not been updated for quite some time. I'll ask the budget office, Leanne Demush, to please take us through the performance-based budgeting that is a result and will have an impact on the fee increases that we're talking about today. Leanne?
Thank you, Larry. Mayor, Council, for the record, Leanne Demush, your Chief Budget Officer. I wanted to start with give you a little bit of history of how this is coming about and start with our performance-based budgeting. As you know, for fiscal year 21, we are starting our second year of performance-based budgeting. And our performance-based budgets, we use statements of mission and goals and objectives to explain why the money is being spent and where it's being spent. And this is a way that allocates resources to achieve a specific objective that's based on program goals and measured results. And as you can see on the slide in front of you, I put a couple of the measured results that Mr. Nichols had for community development. And these are actually the 3 measured results that he used during his budget process for why he wanted to raise the rates and also why he needed additional resources. So I just wanted to reiterate that, this is a process that he took through the budget. Now, the key thing to understand here in performance-based budgeting, as you well know, lies beneath the word result. So in this method, the entire planning and budgeting framework is result-oriented. So to just sort of give you an idea, if we use the 3rd bullet here, so what Mr. Nichols and his group put together when they put their strategic plan was that commercial, multifamily, and industrial permits will be issued within 30 business days of the application submittal. Now, the 63 that you see in the parentheses means that this is what he has achieved. This is the result that he has. He should be at 85% as of July 1st of 2020. And as you know, that was a little bit over a month ago. But he's at 63%. For an example, if let's say in 1 month he received 100 application submittals, 63 of those applications were issued within 30 days instead of 85 of those applications being submitted. So as you can see, this is a process that he has taken all the way through his budget process. And this is what we're trying to get to with performance-based budgeting as well. And now I did put in our budget one. So by 2022, the budget will include a minimum of 80% of the cost of providing services for license, permits, charges, or other service and other fees. So what I did here is I put together the budget needs and for revenue and expenditures, and I went back only 5 years. I felt that was appropriate. CD has only recovered in these last 5 years, on average, 49% of their cost for the one-stop shop. So on average, they've received revenue of $907,000, and expenditures, they have used $1.8 million. I did put in the 2021, and the reason this is in yellow is because this is all projected. This is what he put into his budget for the current fiscal year that we're in. So these are not actuals, but the rest of these are actuals. And the reason this is important is because, as you can see, I put the 80% expenditure in here. So if we went back to the previous slide and you see that for budget, that the budget will include a minimum of 80%, what I did was looking at here, we're trying to reach this goal of 80%. And here is what the difference is that he's not, achieving for that goal. So for fiscal year 2021, the Community Development Department requested 3 new positions and 1 reclass position, which is a total budget of $284,000. And that is only for 6 months. We only budgeted all of those positions for 6 months, and they were contingent upon the approval of his rates as well. He requested a combo inspector, which I think he would like to talk a little bit more about, a building official, and a senior planning tech. And as you can see, all of these, if I go back 2 more slides, all of these fit in perfectly with the strategic result that he asked, that he used as justification. Building inspections will be conducted within 24 hours or less. This is his combo. 90% of the applications will require less than 2 reviews. Here's his building inspector, and then the commercial, the commercial multifamily industrial permits will be issued within 30 days. And that was his senior planning tech. And I think also too, and I apologize, Larry, I think Mr. Nichols wanted to go over a little bit about this under the one-stop shop, this first bullet here about the IVI being at 85%.
Yes, thank you, Leanne, and Mayor and Council, Larry Nichols, Community Development. And one of the reasons I wanted to speak about the slide, the first bullet point, where it shows that our strategic goal was to have the 90% of inspections within the 24 hours. Earlier this year, in the last part of 2019, December, but then into January and February of 2020, we were only achieving 47% of our objective. This was brought about because we were understaffed with an electrical inspector. We could not get one hired. We went through a number of interviews. We'd have people withdraw because we needed to be resourced for that position. And what it does, it brings to light what we're talking about here in terms of generating resources in order to have our customer service meet the goals that we had hoped for. So it became very apparent to me that something needed to be done. And we made an adjustment there through technology. You see on the slide where we say now with the IVI, which stands for interactive video inspection, we're at 85%. But that was only achievable because we acquired some resources. In this case, it was equipment and technology. And in addition for the electrical inspector position being filled, but primarily the technology resource was developed. It's been very well received by the community and by us because we are getting closer to our goals. That's a perfect example of when your resources are available to you and you can implement them, then you can achieve the customer service levels that you're wanting. And the revenue fee increases would avail ourselves of that resource. And I'll go back to Leanne with that.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor, Council, for the record, Leanne Demush, Chief Budget Officer. Just to finish up, like I said, Mr. Nichols is requesting for community development 3 new positions, 1 reclass. For the benefits to these additional staff, you're going to see an increase in the strategic results of about 20%, if not more. One of the things that's a valuable tool to builders and developers is that the inspections will become more predictable. That way the builders and developers can plan. I think I've heard it's extremely important to them. A majority of permits will be processed under 30 days. and the applications will require less than 2 reviewers. And with that, I'll turn it over to Larry and to Tim Pitts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Tim Pitts, Deputy Director of Community Development. So I'll talk to what we think is going to happen with this building fee increase. What are we going to get out of it? And as Leanne has talked about, the department's strategic business plan will be able to meet some of the goals we've had set. We have had very high demand, and so we have a very high expectation, our own expectations on us for our customer service, and we'd like to be able to meet that. We want to be able to service to the customers that we have outlined in our business plan. This will allow us to hire a couple of additional staff, one a combo inspector that'll help standardize the inspection process, and a plan reviewer, a building official to help us in the plan review side. And then we have already identified someone to help us on the processing the plan review so that they're more efficiently handled, and we don't have as much time between. We also have updated some software. We have some new updates we would like to bring in the coming year as we have some impact of the technology fee. We've already in the process of implementing the interactive field, the interactive video inspection program. And then we're issuing things online. And one of the things that I think we found is that through the things we've done over the past 5 years, we were actually really well prepared for the COVID crisis to stay open, to keep business going, to keep construction activity going. And so we want to be even better prepared for that going into the future. And then lastly, and I think this is actually a very important point, that we really need to align our building fees with reality, that they are not aligned with reality right now. They are extremely low. So Leanne. I already gave this example, so I'm not going to repeat it. I just want to point it out to you that this is in general what the building permit fees are changing by on the commercial side. So relatively large increases, but well within the expectation of most contractors, most builders in the larger area. If you went to Tucson or Albuquerque or El Paso or Phoenix, you'd see these you'd see fees even higher than these. But we feel these are relevant for our local area. I did want to talk about some more precise examples, as I felt like in our last presentation, maybe we didn't well explain how the different fees were working. So I went through our current applications and picked out some that will have different fees as a result. So these are actual applications that we've gotten in the past week or two, and what the fee would be going forward. Now you'll notice on this slide, this is plumbing and mechanical permits, that there's an asterisk next to the current fee. And that means that these fees are dependent on what exactly you're doing. The new fees would not be dependent on what exactly you're doing. They are flat fees. And that's part of our goal here is to simplify fees. We don't want to have a very complex fee schedule. We want to have one that is very predictable and very straightforward for the applicant. So if someone's coming in to replace a water heater, we're going to generally charge them a flat fee of $50. Currently, it depends on how many fixtures they're working on, how many things they're touching, but generally they come up with a fee. The fee that came up in this one was the $33.75. So that fee's going up a little bit. I gave an example of a recent commercial HVAC that came in. Current fee was $101.75. The new fee would be $135 on that permit. And then on the residential side, a current fee for if you're doing a new home Plumbing installation would be $77.25. Again, depending on how many fixtures, how many bathrooms, how many sinks, and so on. The new fee is a flat fee, $100. Put in as many fixtures as you want or as few as you want. We're not gonna change the price based on that. For a larger home, so that may be that first home might be 1,400 square feet. The one with 3 baths might be 2,500 square feet, and you'll see that new fee is a flat $150. And then I have some examples from our electrical permits, and I picked these out intentionally to show a couple things. Generally speaking, we did the same idea of making the fees flat, so you'll see a lot less variation in what the fees will be, but I wanted to pick out a few. So, for instance, a pretty common thing to do is a service change. Currently, you would pay $132.50 for that fee. The new fee would be $150. But I went to that same tenant improvement discussed earlier that we did the HVAC system on, and have someone put in a new 200 amp service. And you'll notice that since we're flat feed, the current fee was $220. The new fee would go down to $200 because we made it flat across a large number of amps. And what we did in the electrical fees is we chose things that we think will be helpful to the consumer. Some of the ways that our fees are set up now, it's cheaper for the electrician to do something that is not in the customer's best interest. So we have changed those fees to make it so that our fees are cheapest when you do what's best for the customer. So we could do that with electrical because of the way that the fees were organized. I also point out that on that same 1,400 square foot home we talked about earlier with the plumbing, our fee isn't going to change, and we're keeping that the same. The larger home, the fee goes up a little bit. And what we did, and you'll see here on the swimming pool electrical permit, those types of permits, we actually had them go up a little bit. So we're trying to keep the affordability in there, but also have some realistic fee that will cover our costs. And then lastly, and this slide will be hard for you to see on the screen, but just to show you, we did some public engagement. Larry recorded a video of the PowerPoint slides to show what the fee schedule was happening, and then our Jamie and her group put this out on the internet for, and this was advertised on this webpage and elsewhere. And you'll see about 6,000 people were contacted through this thing. We had a couple hundred that had some interaction, clicked on it, 75 that came through and looked at the PowerPoint, and then we had about 23 of them that reacted. 9 of them with a like, 6 of them with a little angry face, and a couple people that retweeted it or sent it on to someone else. So we did have quite a few people contacting. Still, we had very little in the way of response. We did have a couple. So if you'll go to the next slide, Leanne. There were a couple of comments that I'll mention. The first one that I was a little disturbed by is that house isn't in Las Cruces, and it's true, it isn't. So we apologize for not using a house in Las Cruces on that picture. But that is the sort of house that might get built in Las Cruces. So we think that's okay. The question from a few people I've gotten, either through this outreach or through earlier outreach we took, are residential fees changing again? No, they are not. We did that last year. We're not going to change the residential permit fee. There is some clarification, and there is the technology fee. Additional question, is the technology fee in addition to the building fees? And yes, it is. That's for us to recover costs associated with the technology to provide better service. Most of the time, it's resulting from a cost savings that the customer has, not having to come into the office or not having to print out as many copies of plans. And so to us, it was, if we're going to save you $1,000 in printing your plans, maybe you could give us $100 of it to offset the price of this technology. So that's the idea there. One of the questions that actually I read and was a little taken aback by, but thought about it a little bit and said, well, this is a good point someone's making. Where's the enforcement? Those of us that follow the rules must pay the bill. And then he went on to say he didn't want to see the fees rise. I would have a response to that, and that is that one, right now, almost all of our efforts are given towards the people who pull the permit. Our inspectors go out and inspect their work, and that's been really our goal, is to make sure that when you pull a permit, we are out there in a timely manner doing an inspection, making sure that what you're building is safe, making sure that you can tell the customer that it was properly done, and it was a third party verified that this work was done in accordance with code. But the question about enforcement is still a good one. I've worked in other municipalities that where there was much higher rates of enforcement. I can tell you, enforcement is a very expensive thing. Whether that's through codes enforcement, or it's us sending our inspectors out to look at work that may or may not have a permit. And I think that goes back to the resources question. I mean, I think that the amount of resources we have is going to depend on how much we can enforce. And right now, we can basically enforce with the people who pull permits, who do that under their obligation as licensed contractors with the state of New Mexico. They're obligated to pull permits. That when we do that, we go and inspect their work, make sure that they're doing safe work, and for the most part, I think most people do a good job and a safe job, and our inspectors are there to make sure that that's the case, and to give the home buyer or their customer the peace of mind that there was a third set of eyes on that knows what they're looking at. And then the last question that I got that it causes us to look at the fees and figure it out: does appliance installation require a permit? And so the answer to that question is, if it's done as part of the construction of a new home, no, it doesn't require a permit. That's part of the building permit, unless it's something like an HVAC system, an air conditioning system, in which case it requires separate inspection of the appliance itself as part of the inspection. So that has to be part of the mechanical permit. If it's an after the fact installation of something, then yes, it would require a permit. And that permit would generally be the base fee most of the time. And it would, of course, depend on what exactly is getting installed. But that was something that was brought up. We had other people commenting, but most of the comments were just, could you clarify this? Or I read it this way, is this correct? And but that's the majority of what we've heard and what we've done. So I'll turn it back over to Larry to finish us off.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor and Council. This is Larry Nichols, Community Development. I would just add a few additional comments to a portion of the presentation that Dr. Pitts provided. The enforcement question, the rest of the sentence on that was, they were saying, how come there's not more enforcement in discovering people that are doing projects without getting permitting? And of course, that's a very challenging one. I, like Dr. Pitts, have worked in other jurisdictions where there's a stronger enforcement of that. If we have more staffing, we certainly can take that on. We'd be glad to do that. The other item that I wanted to highlight just briefly was, when we were going over the different inspection fee increases for electrical, mechanical, and plumbing, you noted that some of them were increased $18, $20, $50. Some did not change. Some stayed the same, and one of them actually decreased. That may have caused a question in your mind, thinking, well, if you're talking permit fee increases, why wouldn't everything be increased by maybe a certain percentage? But we felt it was more equitable to go through and look at each of our fees see how they apply to the work that we're having performed here in Las Cruces, not across the East Coast or West Coast. And so that's why you saw there were different amounts of fee adjustments and fee updates on the fees, and not just a blanket percentage increase. We think it's more equitable and a more fair evaluation of the fees proposal before you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. It looks like Councilor Sorg has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm all in favor of making the fees proper and mirroring the actual purpose of the fees and how important they are. I would just ask this one thing, though. When inspection is done, it's done right. And it's done. Because I had a new roof put on my house. I did pay the permit fee for that. And the inspector came out at the end of the job and looked at it from the ground, just from the ground. And sure enough, the next big rain, my roof leaked pretty bad. And so I want to have these inspectors to do a good job if we're going to pay these fees. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilor Bencomo?
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you, Dr. Pitts and Larry, Mr. Nichols. A couple questions. Your goal for the 90% will require less than 2 reviews. Can you further explain what that means?
Yes, this is Larry, Community Development for the record. Typically, we have an application, they submit their building plans, being the owner of a business or a developer, and they have a design professional such as a architect or a registered engineer present the plans to us. We do an initial review. We're very good at hitting our 90% for that initial review, the first review. But we hit that 90%. But from that review, we send that out to 8 city departments, utilities, streets, park and rec, ourselves, environmental, and they all put their comments on the plan. And then we return those to the design professional to make those revisions or corrections. The clock is still ticking while that is out for their review. In some cases, we don't get the return plans back for that second review that we referenced for the 90%. We don't get those comments returned to us, corrections returned. In some cases, even 45 days, over 30 days. And that has impacted our percentage on that second review. We have to work together. We have to do our part and get it out quickly. What we're hopeful for and what we ask is that they respond equally quickly so that we can achieve that 30-day of completed plan review.
I'm sorry, Larry, when you say you hope they return it back quickly, they being the contractor, for example, that the business hired?
Yes, the contractor or the design professional. Normally it's the architect or engineer. It could be the applicant, but we send those responses back depending on what the comment was related to. If it was architectural or a building issue, then we give it to the architect. If it was an engineering issue, like a mechanical or electrical engineering issue, then we send that to that design professional, and they send back their corrections to us. This is all done online. But sometimes, well, obviously they're busy too, and those responses are delayed. But the time against our goal is still ticking. The clock is still ticking, and that's what's impacted quite a bit of that. And we mentioned earlier in our presentation that staffing. We need one of the positions that we're asking for that would help that is the building official.
Mhm.
The building official does plan review as well as inspection, but basically oversees the whole program there. And so the building official and then getting our plans returned back to us would vastly help us to meet that goal.
Thanks, Larry. And does a notice go out to the business owner as well that you sent these comments to the designer, the architect, the contractor, whatever?
Mayor Larry Nichols, Mayor and Councilor Ben Como, Larry Nichols, Community Development. Yes, they do. Each of the contractors or the applicant has an account number with the city, and those comments are sent back to the account holder. Normally, yes, the developer or the contractor or the owner is in the loop with his design professionals to know that these comments have been sent out to them.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know because I wondered if, obviously, that is sort of out of your control, right? Once those comments, that first review is out back to the designer or whatever, it's sort of out of your control when they return it. And so I think it's important that the business owner also knows that went out so that they can hold their person they hired accountable, right? My other question, and this might be for you, Larry, perhaps for Mayor or Mr. Maestas, I'm not sure. I'm just curious if for community development to be fully staffed to what they need, is the only way to do that by raising fees? Does that question make sense? Like, what other department would we do that with?
Well, Counselor, let me just jump in. It's interesting. It's an interesting question you present. And I know, and of course, we always knew it was imminent that Dr. Garcia was going to eventually retire. But if you take a look at Dr. Garcia's department, he runs it what they call enterprise fund. And he runs it by, he generates his revenue to pay his employees through the fees that are set. He doesn't make a profit. He just does what he needs to cover his expenses. And so if you look at this, ideally, it might not be something that may not be a bad policy for us to start looking at various departments. Now, granted, various departments that could operate, such as the utilities, where it's a kind of just on a cost of service. How much it costs, this is how much we should be bringing in. Now, granted, that doesn't work for transportation. Like Roadrunner. There's no way if we were to do something like that, the fees would be sky high. Let me stop right here. David wants to jump in. David Maestas. David?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize for not being able to get on quickly. Thank you for jumping in and starting the discussion. You were headed in the same direction, Mayor, that I would be for certain areas. There are areas that we have been looking into, for example, in public works. One of the things that they are doing is tracking their time within the engineering application portion of it. And then that way they can get a better idea for the actual resources allocated for each of the types of items that they're working on. We've also had to offset that in some cases if we don't have enough resources, or depending on the complexity and expertise of projects, then we have consultants jump in. So we definitely are looking into that in some areas to see what it would take to have a different level of service based on the resources that we have in place. But as you mentioned, there are other areas, other departments that we wouldn't be able to do that. We may never see a return on the investment, such as transit. But there are some areas that we are looking into that for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Councilor Bencomo. And so I know I've heard you on many occasions, rightfully so, concerned with some of our less paid employees. And so when we start moving in that direction where, and I'm not suggesting that we go right to full cost of service on some of the departments, but if we start moving in that direction, in that trajectory, that does leave us a little bit more wiggle room to help those employees that may be in the lower spectrum of income. Like, for example, other benefits that you've often talked about how it gets kind of expensive for them, and I agree, it does. And so if we start moving in that direction, that might be beneficial.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I think this is worth a conversation. I feel like community development plays such a pivotal role in, I mean, all departments, right? Like all of them play an equal part to make this city run. And community development has such an outward looking service that they're providing to our community in terms of economic growth, in terms of perhaps even this reducing the poverty rate. Like it is a pivotal service that we're providing to community. And so I'm wondering, when we look at our whole budget, why it is that community development continues to get less and less money, or I don't know if less and less, right? I've only been here for not even a whole full budget process, but as I'm looking at the budget, I think community development gets a pretty small percentage of the entire budget. And so I'm curious about, even just in this department where we wouldn't have to put it on the customer, the burden on the customer in order to give community development a full staff that they need to provide a service to the community. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I have to tell you, in a few years back, I would have many contractors and developers who build in other parts of the state, right, other than Albuquerque, who would tell me what these other communities are doing, and then why don't we do that? And my response is, because you can't beat the quality of life here in Las Cruces. And so, these other communities have to lower what they do, give these incentives, because that's what they have. But the quality of life isn't even close to what it is here in Las Cruces. And so I think it's fair to say that I think we could move in this direction and see how it works, and provide that additional revenue to community development, and kind of monitor it and see how it goes. And perhaps we may even want to go even higher. I'm going to tell you right now, which is amazing, the construction, new homes construction is increasing. It's actually leading to higher rents, believe it or not, because the homes there's less supply, and there's huge demand, and rents are going up. And so, I mean, that's a good thing if you're a landlord, but it's a bad thing if you're someone looking for a place to live.
No, I believe it. I mean, I tell people how much I pay my mortgage now, and it's significantly less than some people pay for rent. So,
absolutely.
But no, I mean, like I said at our last meeting when we talked about this, was that I definitely feel like there's a certain industry that needs to pay their share in terms of how growth is happening. I think housing developments are, as we've seen, not slowing down at all, right? So I definitely think there needs to be sort of that increase for a lot of folks. And again, from the last conversation, my biggest concern is for the couple who are starting their barber shop or whatever, right? Who don't have a lot of capital like a fast food restaurant would have. That this burden would fall on them as well. But I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I really do hope that we, as we move into a new budget year and that whole process, I'm really looking forward to it. But I'll certainly, be advocating for some of these departments to see that increase without having to go to the customer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Dr. Pitts, for bringing this back to us, for having the discussion with council on some of the things, particular Councilor Bencomo mentioned, of how to structure equitable fees that benefit and really promote growth where it needs to happen, and where folks perhaps don't have the type of investment to make that they would if they were, big time developers or franchisees. I think that continues to be a concern of mine, is how are we incentivizing that type of growth that we want to see in the inner part of the city. This is a flat fee structure all around. And so, whether you're building on Picacho or on El Paseo or off of Sonoma Ranch, the fees under this structure would be the same, whereas, through different types of policy that we can make, certainly, but perhaps through the fee structure, being more creative with our community development department, we can also incentivize growth and rebuilding where we want to see it in the city, rather than kind of reacting to, hey, everybody's building homes on the East Mesa right now, so let's raise the rents or let's raise the fees for everybody. So, I still would like to continue to explore how we do that. Perhaps it's a type of fee structure that's built in to the existing fee structure that you have, Larry, that fits that fits a certain parameter, that helps to accomplish some of the Elevate Las Cruces goals that we have for infill development that would be triggered. Perhaps once we, when somebody submits an application. I understand that we're behind on setting the fees that we need to set to be comparable to other markets. So I'm glad we're doing it now, but also, let's kind of revise that as we go year to year, so that we're not having to do this again in another few years. I know that happened to the utilities with our rates across the board for the different services that the utilities department provides. So I know the developers can pay for it. I continue to be concerned that it cuts across the board without that equity lens of where we want to see development and how we incentivize that. And so I just want us to continue thinking about how we use our community development department, how we incentivize that type of growth we want to see in the inner part of the city, where we're seeing a lot of abandoned buildings, where we're seeing a lot of roads that are in disrepair, where we're seeing that need for investment. And so, Larry, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or how we can get there, but would like to see how we can get there in the future.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilor Velasquez. Larry Nichols, Community Development. We do the fee structure. We'll be utilizing a mechanism that we have in the International Code Council fee table, which is called a local area modifier. They've kind of addressed the idea. I hope I'm still on. Am I still on?
No, you're here. You're here.
Okay, my screen just went blank for some reason.
Oh no.
But anyway, I'll continue with the comment. Oh, there we are. We're back. So with the local area modifier, took into account that every jurisdiction across the United States does not have the same economics, does not have the same incentives in those items. But for Las Cruces, they use the benchmark of Las Vegas, Nevada, and Los Angeles as a factor of 100, if you will, for permit costing. And Las Cruces is 12% less than that. So they say it's less costly to have a structure, similar construction here in Las Cruces than it is in those other benchmark cities. So we will be applying the local area modifier that will help the folks that are wanting to put a new business and have to watch their expenses. Building fees, traditionally, I'm not speaking of impact fees, but the building fees themselves represent, currently in Las Cruces right now, represent less than 0.5% of the cost of a proposed development. That 0.5% may be difficult for folks, but I believe is equitable and fair.
Thank you, Larry. So I have a question for you on, I guess, just some of the incentives in particular, right? We want to make it attractive for people to redevelop or to repurpose some of the areas in our city that have, for many reasons, perhaps not been so desirable for new businesses to move in. I'm thinking of El Paseo in particular. Would you be okay, for example, with a policy where if we drew a map around the El Paseo corridor as part of the El Paseo blueprint, part of what would make an attractive investment to somebody that wanted to repurpose an old Chinese restaurant, right, or a Payless shoe store, to be, as you said, the fee is so small and so nominal especially to the overall budget of the department, where we could waive building fees if people were to, build in a select area of town where we really need some of those buildings to be repurposed and revitalized. Is that something that you would support?
Mayor and Councilor Vasquez, Larry Nichols, Community Development. I have to say it directly because I don't want folks to get the wrong impression. Currently, and this was an ordinance that was updated about a year and a half ago, we are not enabled to waive fees. We do have incentives, and we do have those programs, for example, and we talked about this last time in our discussion about infill districts. We often defer fees to encourage development. In this case, your mention of the El Paseo corridor. So that, I think that's something that would probably have to come from council, that you would say to the Economic Development Department and the Community Development Department, in particular, the permitting section. We elect to have this provision to defer or incentivize the building fees themselves. If that was brought to us, obviously we're going to take that under consideration and implement.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, David?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I can't raise my hand because I'm a co-host on this meeting, but I just asked staff to look into it's not a deferment for the infill area, which includes the El Paseo corridor. I've been here so long. I was the original drafter of the infill policy plan for the city, and I thought that was long adopted policy that we were not required to charge impact fees, not impact fees, building permit fees for the infill area. Impact fees and certain other fees we are. I thought that had been long established policy and had been in practice when I was down in community development. So I don't know when that practice changed, but I've asked staff to look into that. Those fees are not as significant as other areas, other fees. Impact fees are large. Those are cost driven and service driven, but I'll ask staff to look into that, because next week we can amend the draft policy to include that there is a waiver of the fees within the infill policy, within the defined infill boundary for the impact fee, for the building permit fees. I thought that was long established. We're not getting rich over them. And it is seen as, when we drafted the infill policy plan, as an incentive to encourage people to reuse property within the infill boundaries. So we will follow up.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. I mean, I think, we as council rely on staff, right, to help implement some of the things that that you have all helped us create in terms of the vision for the city, specifically with Elevate Las Cruces and the type of revitalization of certain areas that we want to see in the city. And so, as much as council can be proactive about bringing policies to staff, I would love for staff to also be creative in bringing policy ideas to council in order to meet those goals that are already out there and established. And so, as we are looking about, when we're rethinking fee structures and big changes to departments, that we take that opportunity to really re-envision, right, how we can do things a little bit differently to kind of meet the goals of who we want to be as a city. And so that's all I would, hope that we could continue having those conversations so that it's not a one-way street. I don't think council, and I won't speak for everybody, but I don't think we want to be in the position of pushing policies on staff. I think, it would be great to work with staff to work on policies that meet mutual goals in a very creative way that's also equitable. And so I just keep thinking about, if we do things the same way, more buildings are going to go empty on El Paseo. If we go business as usual, like nothing will change. Because it's just going to continue to become a less desirable place for any business to set up. So I just want us to be creative in that approach. And when we do something like change the fee structure for for commercial permits, it's an opportunity for us to rethink that. So I just want to make sure we continue to have that conversation, and that hopefully staff is thinking along those lines as well. And excited for a new city manager too, that hopefully can help implement some of those things in the plan that you all helped us pass as well. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate all your work on this and your thoughtfulness, as well as Dr. Pitts. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sword.
I guess I was unmuted already. I muted myself. I'd like to carry on what Councilor Vasquez is talking about, carry to another step, and also to concur with Mr. Dallahan too. It has been my understanding almost all 11 years of being on the council that there was several incentives, including fee payments, that infill, which courses from University Avenue all the way to North Main, from Valley Drive all the way to Interstate 25. That infill area had several and waiver of fees that either building a new building or remodeling an old building and so forth. I think we need to have that outlined clearly so we all understand what the incentives are for building and working inside that infill area. I was in the impression that all the impact fees, but the building fees were waived. But let's get that clear so that everybody, not only the council and the staff knows it, but everybody in the city knows it too. This has been a little bit of a in the cloud, so to speak, in a fog as to what is an incentive there and what isn't. So I would appreciate that be presented ASAP. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry, Dr. Pitts, and my colleagues. Very robust conversations. I wanted to ask, I appreciated slides 3, 4, and 5. I think that is really important to stress, and I appreciate the connection to your strategic plan. I think much of what you're asking is to be able to have a robust services, timely services, quality services. And I think one way to do that is, and I've appreciated seeing the fee schedule. I did receive a email from Jake Redford. Mayor, I forwarded that to you. I wasn't sure if you would be reading that, but he was concerned about why. Why are we raising the fees? And said something to the effect of just because it hasn't been raised in 14 years isn't a good reason. But I do think it's a good reason as you connect to the strategic plan and your strategic outcomes. All that makes much sense to me. Mayor, you had made mention, other cities in New Mexico. I wondered, Dr. Pitts and Larry, in your fee schedules, how did you determine that? Did we have, I don't recall, did we have a come in and sort of help us look at what our fee schedule is and what we need to have to get to the place that we need to be in terms of those percentages of quality service?
And Mayor Pro Tem Gondara, to answer your last question first, yes, I've worked in 4 other jurisdictions over my 22 years working with building departments and then discussing building fees all the years. And of course, no one ever wants to see increase in any kind of charge or fee. But what we have done is we have worked extensively with the International Code Council. That is the agency that through the State Construction Industries Division establishes our our codes that we work from and the fee tables that we work from. The fact that we recognize that a building and building fees are particular to a location, it helps a great deal. And so that's what we have done here. But we've taken it a step further. We recognize that the way that work is in some projects is accomplished would not warrant just a automatic increase. And so we spent quite a bit of time in our analysis on the fee table that we had to come up with a new one. It was based on the number of years of experience that I have with it, the number of years of experience that Dr. Pitts has as well. I know they're in concert with other jurisdictions across New Mexico. I'm the president of the Southern New Mexico Building Officials Association, and I confer and talk to Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Clovis, Hobbs, Silver City, and we talked about the fees with them and their fee structure, and we're in concert with them. I can tell you this: whenever we have a developer that comes to us from out of state to build renovate a McDonald's or to build a hospital, such as the one we just completed, they are astounded. They actually look at us and say, "Oh, where can I sign up for this? We don't. Let me get in there." Because quite honestly and candidly, our fees are quite less than just about any place in the Southwest.
Okay.
But a lot of that has to do, why are they coming here? Not because of our low fee structures. What the mayor said earlier in the meeting today, they're coming to Las Cruces because it is a great community to live, work, and play. And we want to see that continue. Answering Councilor Vasquez's question, how can we incentivize and help people to do that? Councilor Vasquez was saying, well, would you support a policy or would you develop a policy? The thing about building fees, they're beyond policy, they're ordinances. And so that has to come from the city council. But we can certainly draft things for that in that regard. I don't know if that helped answer the question or not, but I'll ask Dr. Pitts to contribute as well if you would like.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to understand where are we in terms of our fees compared to other cities here in New Mexico, but in other states. That I think that is always helpful to know. And if Dr. Pitts has more to offer to this question, I'm happy to hear from him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gondura. Yeah, I think what I would throw in is that what we did is we looked at our costs of providing these services to, and I understand that maybe our fees, we don't raise fees just because time has gone by, but salaries have gone up, costs of trucks goes up, costs of providing healthcare goes up. Our inspectors are very expensive, and they're very, very good. I have to tell you, I've not worked with a better bunch in my life, and we have a very good group of inspectors. But they're expensive, and they're a lot more expensive than they were in 1993 or whatever it was when we adopted these. So, that was really the goal, is to make sure that we could adequately provide the service we're claiming we're providing, and sort of going back to Councilor Sorg's comment earlier, we do recognize a problem that we had in 2015, 2016 with re-roofs. It was a very serious problem, and as many of you know that may have been around at the time, the number of re-roofs inspections we did was incredible. And really some of our new methods are really there to assist in that. And I think we've gotten a lot better at handling those sorts of things with our interactive video inspections and so on. So that's really the method. As Larry says, we looked at what ICC recommends. We looked at what our neighbors did. We looked at what our costs are, and we looked at how can we provide these services in a cost-effective way, and what would the fee have to be if we were gonna do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dr. Pitts. I also want to reiterate what my fellow counselors have said, Vasquez and Bencomo, as it relates to really looking at incentivizing, particular areas, not so much waiving fees, but maybe, again, incentivizing those areas, or when we hear, as we are talking about economic development and those things, Davin is constantly saying just having buildings prepared, ready to go is what, a lot of folks are asking for. And so I appreciate those comments. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, before I get to Councilor Sorg, I'm going to read the, the email. It says, Mayor, I wanted to throw my this is from Jake Redfern. One of you, I guess he emailed me directly. Wanted to throw my 2 cents in on the permit fee discussion today. I'm concerned that the rationale for the proposed significant increase is a little shallow. Simply stated that fees need to be raised because they haven't been raised in 14 years doesn't make sense to me. I haven't raised my commission fees in 14 years. And if I did so, I would probably lose clients unless I could provide some tangible proof of value to them. Will this increase the time frame to secure any permit? And are you willing to put something in writing on that? I believe that there should be benchmarks that are followed up on. Also, I am anxious to understand why such the large increase. I am sure you understand this in your business. Just raising rates because it hasn't been done in a while would likely cause your clients concern. Thank you for taking these thoughts into consideration. I'll follow up after the meeting. Thank you. So, sure, he brings up a point, but unfortunately, so if when he talked about increasing his commission fees, so let's just use a hypothetical of 10%. So 10 or 20 years ago, a building may only be 100,000, and now it actually goes up to 200,000. So just the mere fact that the buildings actually appreciate keeps up with increased revenues, and so I don't think you do that, Larry. You don't charge a percentage of the value, or do you? Or perhaps maybe you might want to incorporate something as the size gets larger, the fee gets a little bit larger. I think that's done on some things, but maybe not on everything universally. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor. This is Larry Nichols, Community Development, for the record. The valuation table is a graded table. As the larger scale project, the more dollars, the lesser the fee. It tapers down. It's not a flat 10% clear across. That's been that way for many, many years on commercial fees. So it's not based on a percentage. It's based on valuation. It's based on the type of construction that's being used, whether it's a steel frame building, a concrete building, a wood frame and stucco building. All of those come into play to determine what the multiplier would be the term. The multiplier is based on the valuation, but it's not a straight 10% for just anything and everything.
Let me ask you a question.
I guess I would comment a little, because I've had other people tell me, I haven't increased my charges in a number of years. But what happens is that their charges are based on a percentage. Like, I probably should know more about the real estate commission fees than I do, but I do know that normally the house I bought recently or not too long ago, the realty fee was something like 5 or 6% of the cost. And to your point, Mayor, if the cost went from 100,000 14 years ago, and now it's 300,000, you multiply 6% on 300,000 versus 100. There was more revenue. Just because the value changed, even though the multiplier did not.
Good point, Mr. Nichols.
Counselor, can I ask Larry real quick one question then before I go to you?
Real quick, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. So Larry, let me ask you this. So if someone comes in looking to do a renovation on, let's say, their office, and they put down the value at 75,000, okay, and then you charge them accordingly based on what they think that the renovation is going to cost. Is that correct?
Mayor, Larry Nicholas, Community Development. We do, on the application, we do ask the applicant to state their valuation for the project. And I'll have to be very candid with you and honest. Sometimes those valuations are just simply not achievable. I mean, wow, if I thought to myself a couple of times, wow, if you'll bill for that price, I want you to come bill for me. But we look at that, and if it's not a reasonable expectation for what normally would be cost, and we have many items to refer to for that. We have the what is called the RS means cost of construction tables. So we check to see if it's a reasonably believable evaluation. If it is, we do it. If we think it's way undervalued, then we ask the contractor to come in and talk to him about that, and we talk to him about it. And normally we are able to show that national averages with our local area reduction should be the about that value.
Okay, but is the fee based on the amount that they tell you that they're going to do?
It's based on valuation, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Time, yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, and then let's say after they finish the job and they've put in another 100,000 more than what they put on the valuation, does anyone go back and check to see, what they originally said was going to be maybe 75, now it was 175, and then actually go back and charge them the difference for what the permit should have costed if they had projected right?
Mayor, Larry Nichols, Community Development, that going back and reassessing is not performed. No, sir. We go with the original valuation.
Yeah, are you saying it's not performed because you don't do it, or it could be done, or a combination of the two?
It's not a practice that we have done. It
Okay.
could, but it's not a practice. We go with the initial evaluation, and then we don't go back and reassess what change orders may have come about, or what, because sometimes those change orders are not necessarily construction. They are related to an upgrade of equipment or something of that nature that would not be additional plan review time or additional inspection time.
Okay.
But it's
All right.
something that could be done, sir.
All right, just curious. Dr. Pitts, looks like he has a quick question. Oh, Stacy dropped.
Yeah, thank you. No, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond a little bit that the new fee schedule is supposed to make that easier, because we by adopting the ICC's table, we're no longer looking at what someone is actually building for. We're looking at what the industry builds for, and we're charging a fee based on that. So it's a little bit closer to, maybe in the new schedule, it's a little bit closer to what your mechanic does. He doesn't actually look at how many hours it took him to do the work. He looks at a table that says this is how long it should take to do the work, and then he charges you a fee based on that. And so that's what we're looking to do, is to have a standardized number that comes out of these tables that Larry's talking about. Because what you're talking about is absolutely, it's a very serious problem. Someone comes in and underbids, gets a project, does it for a small amount of money, and then change orders it to death, ends up charging more to the customer and they pay a lower fee. I mean, it's we know that to be a problem, and as Larry says, it's a very difficult thing to come back and try and adjust for. And we don't really want to be in the business of judging someone's business. I want to be in the business of charging fees to go do the inspections we need to do to keep the public safe.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, thank you, Dr. Pitts. Councilor Sorg, sorry it took so long.
That's okay, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Since Jake Redfern's name has been mentioned now even twice, I'm recalling the time when a few years ago, Jake Redfern was speaking to the Mesilla Valley Economic Development Alliance luncheon and about commercial properties in the real estate area. And he made a comment about how he thought that a piece of property next to Coles and Lowell's that is undeveloped could not be developed because of all the fees that the city was charging to get that piece of property developed. And he did not, I don't know if he mentioned it was in the infill or not, but I promptly comment or sent him an email saying that's in the infill area and it has fees waived. And so this is another problem. I hate, at the risk of repeating myself, people don't know about these things in this infill area. And so it's so important. If this an ordinance that has been passed that talks about the incentives for infill area, I would call upon our city clerk to find that ordinance and share it with the whole council and anybody else that's in the infill area so that they know what the incentives are. And if they're not enough, by all means, let's have it as a discussion item in the near, not so distant work session so that we can talk about possibly doing some adjustments to it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, by the way, one more thing. Oh, yes, that's what I mentioned. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have another question or comment? Or forget to put your hand down? Okay. Councilor Flores.
Forgot, Mayor, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank you, Mr. Pitts, Dr. Pitts and Mr. Nichols for fully explaining the rationale of why the fees should go up. And you mentioned that you're adopting the ICC, I guess it would be called tables. The fee schedule based on standardizes rates. And I based on your presentation last time and again today, it's abundantly clear to me that those fees are not being changed or raised. It's actually a change in the way the fees are being charged because the old rates seem to go piecemeal and charge accordingly, and now it's just a flat rate. So in many ways, as far as I see it, it's more beneficial to have that standard, that one-time fee. And the other, I would like to also thank you for stating, and also Councilor Sorg for stating at least twice that that the infill areas have the incentives. You know, they have the waiver of fees, and those are the areas. And again, with all due respect to Mr. Redfern, for him to be making that kind of a statement at a Mavita meeting for a piece of land that is actually infill is almost, well, it's unfair and definitely based on wrong information. So, but I do support this. I do support the increase in fees, not because it's been 14 years, but only because it just makes a lot more sense. You just have this one fee for this, one fee for that. Y se acabó. It's done, and you're home. So I want to thank you again, and also for reminding us that we do set policy, that we are the policymakers, and we do need to. We want something done, we set it forth in a policy and in a resolution, and then you follow that accordingly. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Nichols and Dr. Pitts. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like there's pretty much consensus to move forward, Larry, and Dr. Pitts, so I look forward to seeing this on the council agenda soon. Oh, yeah. Thought maybe you had another question there. Anything else you need? You're out of sight, Larry. We just see your shoulder. Oh, there you go.
I'm sorry. I was checking some data here, but Mayor, thank you for that, and I appreciate it. This is scheduled for the August 17th City Council meeting.
Okay.
Have a vote. I believe there is some Robert's Rules of Order or legalese. It was a tabled motion, so I think you'll probably have to do something about having it brought forward from the table, but it is scheduled for a council review and hopefully approval.
Okay, you got it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move back to item 3.1, the interventions support. And that's Mayor Pro Tem is going to lead off that discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And Council, thanks for agreeing to hold this work session on crisis intervention. This, of course, is my expertise, and I'm thrilled that the city has taken on the lead role in ensuring our citizenry get to 100% community, which is access to our survival and thriving services. Looking at policing through a public health lens is a must. Reimagining our 911 system as it relates to our social ills is what we really need to consider. Being able to redirect calls to a crisis intervention team is not only the right answer, but it's a national evidence-based program that other communities are doing at this point in time. I love Las Cruces, and I'm very proud of our community. Over the last 5 years, we've had several positive accolades, from being the top retirement destination to the happiest city in New Mexico and the 28th in the U.S., being the 4th best run city in the U.S. and number 1 in New Mexico. And even with all those positives, positive accolades, we have some very serious issues that we have to attend to. New Mexico's suicide rate is top in the nation. Our poverty rate is 24.5%. We have received last year over 4,000 child abuse and neglect cases. Half of those are accepted and investigated. Las Cruces has a 53% higher crime rate than the national average. Our violent crime in Las Cruces is 6% higher than the national average. Year over year, crime in Las Cruces has decreased 33%. So this proposal, in my heart of hearts, is the right way to move forward. It's an approach that I think most definitely is the right approach to meet our most vulnerable in our community. And with that, Mayor, I will hand it over to Dr. Joe Velasquez and the INET team.
Okay, thank you.
The opportunity. Is everybody hearing us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I have with me here today, I'm Dr. Joe Velasquez. I'm a prescribing psychologist here in New Mexico. I've got with me here today our CEO. We're a husband and wife team. So our CEO, David Velasquez. And also with us here today is Dr. Jack Gibbons, who's sitting directly behind me. Dr. Rhonda Ross, who's sitting right behind him. And if you would come into yes, and Mr. Aaron Garcia, who's the president of our electronic health record and a very key member of our success. So I'll pass it over and David will open up the PowerPoint.
Do you have the PowerPoint there? Or do I need to upload it?
I have, Mayor, I do have the PowerPoint here, so if it's okay with Dr. Velasquez and her group, I can open it up and I can scroll through the pages for them. Thank you.
And looks like I have Mary White that has her hand up. Mary, did you have something you wanted to say?
Not at this time, Mayor, but
okay.
Perhaps after the Vasquez's.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
No, it should be fine.
The slideshow is showing on my screen, Mayor. Is everybody else seeing that as well?
Yes.
Very good. All right, Dr. Velasquez, it's all yours.
David Velasquez, I'm the CEO. I'm an engineer by training. I've been in the high tech field, so for the pediatric and psychological
you know what, Dr. Velasquez, we're not picking you up. It's very, very spotty. Your your voice. Can't really hear what you're saying. But if you keep talking, and we'll see.
Okay, I'm right on the mark, and I do have to speak loud. It's for crisis and outpatient crisis intervention. It's not triage. We do treatment here. We don't sort. It's for the building blocks of the community. Led us to interact with all the wraparound services here in town. There's a lot of services that are here, but it seems like everything's fragmented. We're not a cohesive group and we're not working together as a team. It's more fragmented. Everybody's kind of like in their own silos and working as fast as they can and as best as they can. But I think if we work together as a community, I think things will get easier as far as our workloads, and we'll see more progress as far as our health, our general health in our population. So the next slide. Who is INET Med? We were founded in June of 2015. Currently, we have 10 doctors on staff. We have 1 licensed professional counselor and other qualified mental health professionals. We have 6,000 square foot facility that has about 25 offices, a large conference room, a large waiting room, and multiple other rooms for testing. When we first got started in 2015, our 1.5 providers had about 3,600 visits. Today, we're on target to about 15,000 visits a year. And that's about 230 visits a week. That's kind of a average week. We can do a lot more. We probably have about 25% more in bandwidth. And we have other modalities we also can run at the same time that we're working through during this COVID crisis. We're in the pandemic. We've redesigned a couple of rooms so our patients and our staff or our doctors are safe with the pathogens, separation, air flows, air changes an hour, and to accommodate those pathogens. I got a comment by 2 of the doctors said, well, this needs to be the standard. I myself and also Aaron come from class 1, class 10 clean rooms. We deal with pathogens all the time when it's open manufacturing, so our communities and our customers don't get sick. eating our products, vitamins, over-the-counter medicines. So that's kind of our experience. Next page, please. What service do we provide? We do medication management, neuropsych testing, psychological evaluations, forensics assessment. We do precision medicine through genomics. We do therapy. We do crisis management. A lot of times people come here for the first time, they are in a crisis. So it's not like we get the normal population so-called all the time. We get people that are in crisis. We run labs. And we've been doing telehealth since 2017, so that's nothing new to us. We service adults, adolescents, children in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Next slide, please. Our staff are licensed prescribing psychologists, licensed clinical psychologists, licensed forensic psychologists, postdoctoral students from the university here. We usually have 2 to 3 a year, and then they go on and get their
Uh-oh, we may have lost you.
He's frozen.
Hello? Mayor Pro Tem, can you text them that they're stuck? Okay, well, Mary, we're going to call on you to see if you can kind of take over a little bit of what they do. You work with them, or you have some type of, but you're fairly knowledgeable of what they do. Is that correct?
I'm familiar with INET-Med. I don't work with them.
Okay.
Just know that they are licensed and highly professional group, along with several others in the community. And my comments, Mr. Mayor, first, I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to say just a few words to you and to the other counselors. Also, I want to say how impressed I am with the very thoughtful comments in the last discussion. I know that those conversations come at a time of crisis in New Mexico and nationally, and so the difficulty of raising fees and the ramifications for especially lower income New Mexicans is dire. But my comments have to do first with the
Excuse me for interrupting. Can you just state your name briefly? And I know I called you Mary White, but can you just say this is Mary White and, you know, whatever affiliation you have, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. My name is Mary Martinez White, and I am a board member of the Community Service Corps, as well as a board member of other community organizations in and around the region. I am here on my own capacity, not speaking on behalf of CSC, but that is the organization that I am with, having to do with mental health. And so I wanted to talk with you about the 3 steps that should be in place in a community to address crisis intervention. And these are the 3 steps as outlined in the SAMHSA toolkit. And they are very brief. The toolkit itself, there are 3 short paragraphs. And so I'll outline them for you very briefly.
Oh, okay, Mary, I'm sorry for interrupting. Okay, so, and that's fine, but I just want to clarify. So this is deviating from whatever INET-Med was going to talk about, right? This is a little bit different, kind of similar, but a little bit different.
It's dovetailing into what they're going to be talking about.
Okay, I just want to clarify. I just want my colleagues to know that it's this is something that you wish to share with us, and I presume since you're on our meeting that you were a scheduled speaker.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And thank you, Mayor. So that if you had any confusion, others may have had as well. So again, this does dovetail right in, and it's a part of the conversation that's taking place across Doña Ana County as well as the city, and that is, I want to just briefly outline for you the 3 steps that need to be in place for crisis intervention. or mental health. Number one, they are the call center. You have to have a call center in place. Number two, you need to have a mobile crisis unit. And then finally, you can do a crisis triage center. In that order, they're listed in that order on SAMHSA. And the reason is because you have to have a call center where people can call in the emergency, and you want the crisis to be intercepted in the street wherever the crisis is taking place, and stabilization take place there. Then, once the individual is stabilized, they can be transported to a unit like the Crisis Triage Center. And the reason I bring it up is because the county has indeed moved forward with potential opening of the Crisis Triage Center. That is one piece of a three-legged stool, if you will, 3 legs to the stool. The stool cannot stand up without the other 2 legs. And so without the mobile crisis unit, the crisis shows up at the Crisis Triage Center, which according to the model, this is the plan that's currently before the county, that the county is now contracted for. That model has peer support, which is the greatest aspect of the triage center. In other words, if the crisis shows up at the triage center, then that person is met largely with peer support. And I don't want to minimize peer support. You don't have a program unless you have peer support. For example, the entities such as Alcoholics Anonymous, that requires peer support. And so with the 3 entities all in place, then you have a synergy. You have a program that works together and not just one. And you don't have peer support dealing with the immediate crisis. Rather, you have them supporting after the crisis has been stabilized. And so just that, Mayor, I don't know if the others are ready yet. I could go on just a little bit longer if they have not.
Let's check and see. Let's see if anyone here, I see Joe Velasquez, but it looks like, well, I mean, it shows that it's unmuted. And
Yeah, we're here.
you're here? Okay.
We're
Okay,
here.
good.
I'll turn it over. Thank you,
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you, thank you. Okay, go
Here.
ahead, continue.
For us. Okay, so let's see if I can remember what slide we were. Okay, so our staff, and then
I can't hear him.
No, he froze again. Okay, Mary, you're back up.
and our technology, we have, like I said, like EEG, neurofeedback. Can you hear me now?
Dr. Velasquez, it's almost like as soon as you started, it cut out, and then the only part we heard is, "Can you hear me now?" So I'm sorry, we didn't hear that.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Velasquez, can I recommend they shut off their video?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. You go stop video. Okay, I stopped it.
Okay. You want to start again? With your staffing and technology?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
See, we
yes,
can't
I can hear you. I can hear
Oh,
you.
okay, terrific. So health records, scripts, telehealth, the neurofeedback, psych testing, biofeedback, and alpha stim. Those are different modalities of electronics we use in-house for different types of therapy. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of talk about what to prescribe in psych, and this chart here is to kind of familiar everybody with the difference between a psychiatrist and a prescribing psych, and then a social worker. These are, if you look at what you can bill for according to Medicaid and the CPT. CPT is a kind of a code they put in for billing. Psychiatrists can see about 71 different types of services. A prescribing psych is 67 and a social worker is 20. So the power of the law here in New Mexico is very powerful because there's about 28,000 psychiatrists in the United States. And we all know there's a shortage. And 40% of those psychiatrists are 55 and older. So they're going to retire here in the next 5 to 10 years. And by 2025, there's an estimation we need an additional 25,000 more psychiatrists. So by 2025, we're going to be around 30 to 36,000 psychiatrists short. So the law here in New Mexico is very strong, and then there's other states who have prescribing psychologists. And psychologists nationwide, clinical psychologists who can get the license if they go back to school, there's about 110,000 of them that have their license and practice every day. So they would have to go back for a couple of years and get their license. Next slide. So I'll go over kind of the scope of work, and then Dr. Joe will take over each of the phases. There's a three-phase approach. We want to interface with the police department and the fire department of Las Cruces. Evidence-based, so we get the best bang for the buck, make sure they get the best services out the gate, so we can head them down the right path. And we know they're going to fall off the path, but we let them get back on, we'll help them again. We want to do local services, as Mary's was talking about. The mobile unit's very critical in that three-prong approach with the Crisis Triage Center, outpatient, and working with the police department and fire department. The teams, you saw all the different licenses we have in-house, so they can do anything from treatment to medicine to testing, which is pretty comprehensive, so you get the right diagnosis. And then integrate the behavioral health component with the wraparound services in our community: housing, shelter, clothing, voc rehab, integrate with PCPs, your primary care physicians, dental, just general health in general. Got it?
All right, so phase one.
And Doctor, I need you to state your name, please.
Oh, hi there again, Dr. Joe Velasquez.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor and councilmen and women. So phase one is the super user. So it was identified to us by your police department and your fire department that there's about 900. So actually, this is on the police department side. There's about 915 folks that are super users. And what we would be doing is with our social work team, as part of this project, we would connect with those clients and perform initial assessments in regards to services needed. We'd establish from there a patient-client. Okay, so we'd establish them as a new patient or a client to INET Med and this project services, and we'd put their data, demographics, and needs inside of a coordination software. From there, we would be providing behavioral health services, and we would be integrating them into an interagency, kind of an interagency process. So we would have connections with other agencies who have other specialties when those needs have been identified for this particular client or patient. And there's a coordination software that is used, and then each agency would have a subscription. So in this particular case, we'd have maybe a CYFD would have a subscription, the police department would have a subscription, INET Med would have a subscription, FYI, or peer support, or Mesilla Valley Hospital or the Peak Hospital. In addition to that, the County Triage Center. So we'd have this software that allows all of us to see how this individual is moving through the referrals and the different agencies. Next slide, please. Phase 2 is the mobile crisis intervention. So that's when the INET Med team leaves the building. So we're going to be summoned by the Las Cruces Police Department or Fire Department when those professionals have identified a psychiatric emergency. Las Cruces Police Department estimates they get about 1,550 calls a year. The Las Cruces Fire Department estimates that they get about 8,500 calls that they could identify with significant psychological or psychiatric factors. The mobile crisis team then would be able to perform a professional assessment and determine the type and degree of crisis or distress, and then develop both short-term and intermediate interventions. If they're not able to, in addition to who's on the crisis team, who's in the mobile unit, it'll be a paramedic and a licensed social worker with the capability to telemed in a prescribing psych. Research shows that about 90% of all crises are addressed right there at the point of care by the crisis mobile team, and then can be picked up for follow-up 24 hours later, 18 hours later, they can come in to INET Med, to the crisis intervention, or just into our clinic, outpatient services. If someone gets hung up, we're waiting for a bed, there is not a bed open, then that would be a scenario where the county triage center will be an important resource. Okay, and then all folks who are in phase 1 and in phase 2, who are caught up in those two phases, are then linked to wraparound services. Next slide, please. Okay, so the phase 3 is just what we already do. It's crisis intervention through the outpatient treatment center. So we can provide immediate outpatient behavioral health care and follow-up services. And in the context of that, we can order comprehensive psychological and neuropsychological examinations. Those are particularly important when we want to establish a diagnosis and or we want to establish a disability, for example, so we can get folks on the right track to evidence-based intervention. A lot of times these folks have been misdiagnosed or they have not had access to treatment. And so being able to perform evidence-based diagnoses is going to be very important in decreasing recidivism and then recycling through, the 911 system. Want to expand, also we're interested in expanding the forensic arena, being able to provide psycholegal and other types of assessments that support the community. Next slide, please. I keep waiting to.
I know, you keep grabbing the mouse.
I keep grabbing the mouse on my side.
Further and further away.
They're moving it away from me, but I keep reaching for it. Thank you, Mr. Maestas, for changing the slides. Collaboration. We're going to just strive to developing memorandums of understanding with various agencies that are already well established in their fields and who have expertise in their respective fields, whether that be housing or, vocational rehab or inpatient services or partial hospitalization services. So we'll be linked and networking with them. And we'll be able to, in INET Med, we'll be able to, our case coordinators will be screening and classifying the needs and prioritizing them, sharing information. We will be establishing very clear channels of communication and then linking folks to the appropriate resources. One of our key goals is to minimize duplication of services in any way, shape, or form. So that way we're just running highly efficiently. Next slide, please. So as far as encounters go, the release from the detention center, from what we understand to date, is about 30 individuals. Las Cruces Police Department interacts with about 192 crises. Oh, this is a combination of sheriff and police, this number of 192 encounters. And then the Las Cruces Fire Department, with their numbers, it appears there'll be a 708 encounters per month. And then possibly forensic assessment, and that's addressing the issue right now where folks are being sent up north to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and accompanied by a couple of officers for a day or 2 or 3 for forensic psycholegal assessments, which our team can do here in the house. And then you can read those numbers. So encounters per year on release from detention center then is estimated about 360 per year. Las Cruces Police Department, number encounters per year estimated at 2,304. For the Las Cruces Fire Department is estimated at 8,500 per year, for a total of, for forensic assessments, at about 180 per year. And in the last column, you can see the estimated cost for the Las Cruces Police Department for us to assume that, is that for us to assume?
No, that's their cost per call.
Oh, this is their current cost per call?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to pass it over because he's the businessman and ran the numbers. So let me, rather than me interviewing him, let him tell you. There you go.
So this is just the cost per call, what it's costing to roll that police department out and taken away from other stuff they should be doing, or even the fire department. One of the comments the chief made in the fire department says he gets about 18,000 calls a year, and about 1,000 of those are what they're trained for fires, rescues, so on and so forth. And he says, and there's 17,000. He says about 50% of those fall into your category. So every time we roll that truck out, and if a paramedic goes out there, we're talking some money, $275 to get them out there. So, and that's $2.3 million a year that we're spending in mental health, I think. You could take those numbers and look at them any way you want to, but that's kind of what's going on. The research also says if you look at other people who are doing this, Eugene, Oregon has been doing this since '89. They've had a mobile crisis unit since 1989, and Connecticut's is a state that's also leading this. I think they see 22,000 encounters a year for kids. They don't do adults, they just do kids right now. They've been doing that for the last 10 years, and they put probably about a 80-page report out every year, very thorough, tells you the times they respond and all the different types of diagnoses and how many people follow up and how many go through the program and fall off and this, that, and the other thing. So, we're benchmarking. We're not going to create anything new here. There's people who are experts out there doing it day in and day out. Why recreate something when you can benchmark it? So I was getting back to the point there. If you look at the population who uses the mobile crisis unit, 50% of the population are people who are dealing with the crisis. They lost a loved one. They lost a child. They lost their job. They're going through a bad divorce. People who are working day in and day out, and they have a crisis. About 5% of that whole population is a population that you see that makes the local news because it's it's sensationalized. They're self-medicating. They're schizophrenic. They're bipolar. They haven't been taken care of. The belligerent, the violent. They may be packing. They may not be. They may have a gun. May have a knife, and that's when the police department has to take care of that situation. And that's only about 5% of the time. So you look at it, 95% of the time is you're looking at people who want help. That's all they're asking for. And the police department is doing a great job. There are frontline mental health workers. They're not trained for that, but so is the fire department. And they're doing their best they can. And it's coming to a point now, it's a breaking point. And a lot of cities and states have seen that breaking point and see what the investment is. Some people say you get 1 to 3 for every dollar you invest in it, you get about $3 back. Eugene is getting about 1 to 4 for every dollar you invest in it, you get $4 back. Seattle has a huge homeless population. They say the problem isn't homelessness. The problem is mental health. These people don't choose to be homeless. These people don't choose to have a mental health. There's mental health and there's behavioral health. There's a behavior where you got into a bad behavior. There's mental health, you're genetically born with it. And that's, you can ask the doctors, and there's a difference. You know, it's just like you don't choose to have diabetes. You don't choose to have high triglycerides. Your genetics choose you. So next slide, please. This is just building blocks, kind of a summary, what everything looks like. Next slide, please. Questions. We have the doctors here. You can ask them questions and we can answer them the best we can. But thank you for your time.
Okay, so Councilor Flores, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So thank you, Dr. Velasquez, Dr. Joe, and Mr. David Velasquez. Thank you so much. I think you hit the nail on the head with your wraparound approach to mental health and behavioral. And thank you, David, for making that clear distinction about mental health being hereditary. I think that a lot of people, we know very well, I don't think, it's a given that there is a, people are in denial about mental health issues. People don't want to admit that there is schizophrenia or bipolar or this or the other. And then, of course, we have behavioral health issues that are probably treatable more by a psychologist, whereas mental health issues definitely need a prescribing psychologist and or a psychiatrist to come in with a full diagnosis under the DSM. So thank you so much for that. And thank you. I am very grateful that you're here in Las Cruces. I feel that we're blessed. I think that I'm familiar with your background and all of that. And the combination of the two of you is dynamite. I mean, it's just unbelievable that we have an engineer in high tech working with a prescribing psychologist, and you're still married, I think. So, and thank you, Mary White, so much for your input on this. And I know that a lot of it comes from being, I believe you were the director of the drug court system. But anyway, thank you, Mary, for your expertise as well. I'd like to ask, I don't know which one of you would be able to answer. Can you go a little bit more into the, forensically speaking, how what you have to offer will affect, lower the rate of recidivism? Because recidivism, as we've been told, and former police chief, Patrick Gallagher, said that a lot of the crime that we see, just universally, well, maybe in the U.S., New York, and less in New Mexico, that he's well aware of. So it's probably, you can project that it happens across the map here. But recidivism is something that we haven't been able to get rid of. And you're saying that we can go in, and this can, this wraparound type approach was adopted readily and by many, it would go down. So can you please, someone clarify that or expand on that, please?
Absolutely. We have a couple of ways that.
Excuse me, Dr. Velasquez, when you all speak, can you please state your name, because the person transcribing doesn't really watch the video.
I apologize. Again, this is Joe Velasquez, Dr. Joe Velasquez, prescribing psychologist. Thank you so much, Mayor and councilmen and women, for this opportunity. So there's a couple of ways that we are able to bring down recidivism as far as with this particular outpatient clinic, mobile crisis combined approach. We will, because we have at our disposal psychological and neuropsychological examinations, we'll be able to identify folks more accurately. So, for example, the literature shows the average number of years to diagnosis for bipolar illness is 10. 10 years that someone is out there wandering the desert, trying to figure out, why am I losing my temper like this? Why? I know not to be drinking. Why do I keep having to drink? Why am I having these relationship problems and blowing up at the people I love? And then the police are called, police units are called, or emergency services is activated, and I'm in trouble again. Why does this keep happening? So it's very, very important that we accurately diagnose folks. And once we can accurately diagnose, we then can treat. I can't tell you how many times we see folks I see folks that come in who have been diagnosed with depression, when in actuality it's been a bipolar depression. Well, that means something to us with which medications we're going to use, what approach we're going to use, what therapies we're going to use, and how we're going to link that individual into the wraparound services. If I can make a determination that this isn't a mild-mannered depressive illness, but rather this is a bipolar diagnosis, bipolar 1 or diagnosis bipolar 2, and I can help that person understand. Now, let me tell a little bit about this. When someone sees things and hears things with bipolar illness, that's a type 1. They see things and they hear things. That's pretty straightforward. That individual knows, hey, there's something's not going right for me. Something's not normal for me to be hearing my name being whispered, or for me to be seeing, black cats, 100 black cats when I look out my window and then they're gone. That's not normal. That's pretty obvious. But where we miss a bipolar 1 diagnosis and we mistaken it, meaning we as the behavioral health community, or even and pulling in our integrated health workers, meaning the PCP, where we think it's just a run-of-the-mill depression, it's when I have fits of jealousy. Like, I think my husband, I saw the way you looked at her at dinner. I saw that. And so we call that content hallucinations or delusions, where they're much more subtle. Or I think my husband loves the kids more than me, and he just ignores me, and it just makes me so mad. And then I'm mad at him, I'm mad at the kids, and then I do something silly and the police get involved, or maybe CYFD gets involved. And that only happens a couple times a year. It's not every single day. And so again, it's more subtle. So that can explain why it's going to take 10 years of me going in and out of the system, recidivism, before I finally get a handle on it. And finally, I get plugged into the right team who says, oh, hey, by the way, you don't have the typical run-of-the-mill depression. You've got a bipolar type depression, and we're going to switch you off these type of meds, and we're going to put you on those types of meds instead, and then we get stability. And oh, by the way, because those who have bipolar 1 type illness, they can work about 9 months a year, but there's about, on average, literature says 3 to 4 months a year where they need disability, because that's just the nature of the disease. It's mean. And they cycle in and out. And so we need to plug them in to disability benefits and voc rehab. And then we can stabilize that individual who now can hold a job, who has control, understands why she's getting so very jealous, with her husband, understands why she goes into these rage fits every once in a while. That's really not like her. Now she understands what she needs to do and in managing her medication and then her symptoms. So she's not getting caught up in the system over and over. And we see a lot of that with our males and females. That's one way we bring down recidivism. Is there another way that you would want to give an example? I'm just asking Dr. Ross. Dr. Ross is going to take the mic.
Hello, first name is Rhonda, last name is Ross. I'm a neuropsychologist here at INET-MED. I have some training and residencies in forensic psychology and neuropsychology. To answer the question specifically about recidivism, we know that within our jails and prison settings, a majority of that population have mental illness that is left untreated. I think this is not something that I've really formulated in kind of assisting with INET-MED and developing a program that's much needed in the state. I might add, I am recently a transition from Florida here to Las Cruces. But I think working together with the corrections, Department of Corrections, and identifying those who may be upcoming for release, who of those need services, working hand in hand and in collaboration with the correction system, I think is going to be very important in, really tackling that question you may have with recidivism, having them connected with a resource prior to their release. So they're not waiting around trying to find someone, and then having really good treatment options for them, medication, assessment, community-based interventions as well. So, really that is a whole system approach that is very needed when you look at recidivism rates and how we're going to reduce those.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Dr. Jack Gibbons that's going to take the mic to respond to your question, Counselor Flores.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Jack Gibbons. It's a pleasure to be here. And I come to you all the way from the state of New Jersey, where I spent the last 20 years with the Philadelphia Police Department, the New Jersey Department of Corrections. And my last 7 years have been in 3 county jails in the state of New Jersey. The last jail I worked in, our recidivism rate was about 60%. So 6 out of 10 of our inmates were coming back within a period of 12 months. You say, well, what kind of recidivism are we talking about? Exactly what we're trying to address here. The inmate or the patient that is being discharged to the street and is not stable. When I say not stable, they don't know where they want to go. They don't know what they want to do. They're going to need services in 2 primary areas: case management and psych services. Those 2 have to be brought together. And what happens is the case manager is stabilizing those problems to get that patient readjusted to the community. The psychologist is behind that case manager, dealing with the clinical issues, the clinical areas, the dynamics of the mental illness. So you have that bipart system, which is really, really what you need. And of course, we use the term wraparound services. Of course, there's housing and things like that. But primarily, you're looking at that contact, that connection, where these 2 areas of services are being brought online for that patient. Good case management, where somebody understands what the environmental issues are with this person, with this individual. The clinician is backing that up, looking at saying, wait a minute, why is he doing what he is doing? Or why is she doing what he is doing? What are the dynamics here? Why is this person chronically mentally ill? What can be brought online to change, to bring about a change? I'm not talking about curing mental illness. I'm talking about stabilizing an individual so that he or she can be reoriented to the community. live a life, participate with other people. So basically, there I'll go back and just I'll recap it. My two big areas are, as far as the recidivism question is, the problems I have found have been that good quality case management supported by a wide range of clinical services, medication management, psychotherapy, resocialization, all those things somebody needs to get back into the community. Did that sort of answer your question in some way?
Yes, it did. It did. Thank you so much for your response, Dr. Gibbons. But then, of course, there's always like follow-up. And so what my follow-up question is, you said that there was a 60% recidivism in jails in New Jersey. Was that at the beginning of the 10-year or 10 years, the 10 years that you worked there? Or is that what it exists now?
I would say I'm just speaking from my recent experience in two jails. So I'm looking at the last data accumulated over the last two or 3 years, but I think I can safely say that it's pretty much been that way for
60%.
Yes.
So while you worked there, it didn't go down?
I'm sorry. Say it again.
So did you see a drop in recidivism when you worked there, when you left? Was there a drop by the time you left?
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't have data from 2019. I would say this, that you could see when more services were brought online and they were coordinated, that there was a definite drop. I'm sorry, but I can't give you a number. But I'd say what we are talking about doing is going to definitely have an impact. The other point is that these recidivists, this 60%, let's say these 6 out of 10 individuals, were being rearrested for crimes that usually involved some sort of mental illness. They weren't recidivists based on an armed robbery charge. We're not talking about recidivism based on sex charges, rapes, things like that, aggravated assaults. No, those people are arrested and they go to a state prison most of the time. They don't go back out on the street. So the fact of the matter is that a significant percentage of these folks are recidivists because they went back out into the community. They created some sort of a disturbance. A complaint was made by a citizen. A complaint was made by a store owner for his conduct or whatever. He could have been panhandling, and he or she comes back into the jail under those circumstances because they were acting in a way that was disruptive and considered and perceived by many as a threat. A person out panhandling at midnight on a street corner or tapping on windows or doing those kinds of things that you often find mentally ill people doing, that is the bulk of this population that's being returned to a county jail.
I have some further information. This is Dr. Joe Velasquez again. Counselor Flores, along those lines, a bit of an indirect measure. There is an organization back in Eugene, Oregon, and also in Seattle, Washington. Eugene, Oregon's program is called CAHOOTS, Crises Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. CAHOOTS. So they have a mobile crisis team that rolls around, and their numbers they saved their city $5 million annually inside of the first 3 to 5 years of their program because of their effectiveness in stabilizing the seriously mentally ill population, as well as the proper management of behavioral health crises. And David's making the point they do not, and they don't even have the prescribing psychology law, which we think New Mexico, which is why we're all here. Actually, that's why we have 10 prescribing psychs on the team and why we were able to build, because New Mexico has a powerful, powerful law, and we're especially excited of having the opportunity to present this proposal to you, because it really it shows the power of the prescribing psychology law and what we could do in New Mexico, teaming up with having your psychology and behavioral health teams teaming up with law enforcement, with fire, with corrections department.
So, Dr. Joe, would it be fair to say that by the, you stated that in Oregon and somewhere else, that from in 3 to 5 years that the CAHOOTS program has been practiced, the jurisdictions have saved between $3 and $5 million during that time. So that's a period of maybe 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that that's definitely data and or an indication that shows that something's working?
I would say we probably between 2 and 3 million.
Okay, I'm just getting confirmation. I don't want to speak out of turn. So I was just double checking the numbers. So within the first couple of years, it was 2 to 3 million. As time went on, it got up to 5 million annual savings. The Eugene program, I get them mixed up, Eugene and Seattle, Washington, but they've been rolling since 1989, I believe. Do you remember that, Mr. Velasquez? Yeah, that's correct. So since 1989, there's also a wonderful team that's out there in Connecticut. They are also rolling with mobile crisis teams, and they've also been very, very effective. Additional comment? I'm passing the mic to Dr. Ross. Oh, she's just moving up. Okay, we're good. Hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And thank you for the work you do. Thank you.
Okay, before I get to Councilor Bencomo, I need to disclose why I asked that this item be a work session item. Okay, so that you guys have a general idea of why they're here discussing this. So earlier, it came to me that INET-MED was responding to information asked by the city. And I had met with Dr. Velasquez, Dr. Velasquez's, and I said, you know, I don't recall this being a work session item, because typically it's a work session item and we gather input and then we move forward with how the council wants to proceed. And so they did confirm that, no, it's never gone before council. And so that's why it's here now. Now, the other concern that I had was, and if I may just ask real quick, just for clarification. So Dr. Velasquez, either one can answer this. Earlier, when you were having some difficulties, Mary White said that there were 3 components from SAMHSA. One was a call center, second was a mobile crisis unit, and the third was a crisis triage. So is it fair to say that, are you talking, what you guys are proposing, is this a mobile crisis unit and a call center, or is it just the mobile crisis unit portion because the crisis triage center is already in place? What is it that, or none of the 3? I see Councilor Flota shaking her head. So what is it that you, of those 3 components that Mary White had talked that we need to look at having, which of the 3, or are you saying you're doing all 3 components?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, this is David Velasquez once again. We are proposing a mobile crisis unit, an outpatient treatment and intervention center, and going after the super users. There seems to be, did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
That's good. So that's different than the call center.
Yes, the call center is important, but a lot of the people who are out there doing the mobile crisis unit, the police department or the fire department are the ones who are doing the assessment on site. And they pretty much know what is a psych emergency versus somebody they're going to arrest and take to the detention center or to the jail or wherever they take them. So they're still the front line, but they get the help when, just like when they call a bus to come in because somebody's injured, they call us to come in because it's a psych emergency. There's a lot of confusion in our community of, the crisis triage center, crisis intervention, crisis treatment. The law has changed dramatically back in 2018, I believe February 14th or February 18th, of the Crisis Triage Center. It only allows them to have somebody there for 23 hours, and it's not outpatient services. You only can have them for 23 hours, and depending how they go, either the 16-hour method or the 24-hour method, and then the business plan covers both of those, there may or may not be somebody there during that period of time when the police department needs to drop them off. And the police department cannot leave, the officer or the fire or paramedic cannot leave until that person's been assessed by a nurse practitioner who they're going to use. I mean, the business audit says psychiatrist, but the psychiatrist is like 0.05 times. So he's overseeing the program. So you have a prescribing nurse practitioner that is going to see them if they're there. If they're not there, then you're kind of, in a bad boat. And another thing that just came down that I think you need to be aware of, that's, Jamie Michaels made a comment, there's going to be some bumps in the road, is majority of the people who work there are peer support. And the state just came down that says we will not credential any more peer support people until March 7th, 2021. So how do you get new employees credentialed with the state if they're shut down and open up this crisis stress center? So, Mary's comment of it's a three-pronged approach and we're doing the last one first doesn't really make sense.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. But what I was trying to get at was this. And then, so I had a chance to meet with Dr. Velasquez and Mr. and Mrs. Velasquez. And so, one, I need to clarify that, no, this has never gone before council. And two, the numbers that they had in their proposal, I wanted to know how, how it was going to get paid for. And they said about 45% could be probably paid for by Medicaid, and then the rest, that we're going to figure that out. And so then one of the things that I wanted to do to bring to you all, my colleagues here, is if we could, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but MRVDA, Mesilla Valley Regional Dispatch Authority, is made up of Sunland Park, Hatch, Mesilla, Anthony, and Las Cruces. And we pay accordingly. Now, granted, the city and county pay the brunt of those costs, and then the smaller communities, they pay, a smaller amount. But what I was hoping was if we could join forces with the county, Sunland Park, Anthony, Mesilla, and, I don't know about Hatch. I'll try Hatch to get us all together in a consortium, kind of a more of a governmental partnership. I think we can now get access to a lot more grants to hopefully bring this cost so that it's really very little out-of-pocket costs to city, county, and all the governing bodies. These doctors are the experts in this. I'm going to kind of follow what they have to say. I have nothing when it comes to that. I just want to know how it was going to get paid. And so one of the other things that I said was, like earlier, where they mentioned these numbers from Las Cruces Fire Department at 2.3 million and Las Cruces Police Department at 345,000. I asked, certainly you weren't expecting us to then reduce their budgets by that amount to pay for this, and they said no, they don't think so. So that's where I'm trying to get at is one thing, how are we going to pay for this, and two, is that something you'd like to see us move in that direction and have it more of a county-wide consortium so that we can now attract grants in addition to us paying some monies? And that's really the bottom line, why I had this put on the agenda. So with that, I'm going to go to Councilor Bencomo, Gandara, and Beta Stubi. Unless you're done, Councilor Flores. Did that change
Actually,
the dynamics change any?
You changed the paradigm here. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Joe and Mr. Velasquez, my understanding is this is it's an independent entity that you've already put together. And what you're proposing, Mayor, is something that we discussed back in February, I think. Mary White was in that meeting, as was Paul Doolin and Cassandra, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. And that you brought that concept up. I don't think they're exclusive. And I think that the funding will be there for what you're proposing. It's an intergovernmental district, but I just serving on the animal service center. I've seen that there's even though it's a joint powers agreement and it's whatever, of course, we have a lot in there. So the analogy isn't all that great. Notwithstanding, what does remain is that there is difficulty, without a doubt, and I'm not going to mince words, insofar as working with the county. And we want to break away from that. All that being said, I think what the Dr. Velasquez and Mr. Velasquez are proposing is a totally different ballgame. It's something that's more effective. They've hit the nail on the head. They've come to us with solutions. What you're proposing, and it's probably true. I mean, you've been at this way longer than I have, but I mean, grants are applied for in specific areas. And I don't think the two ideas are exclusive, but it's not the same thing. I think this is very different. And right now, my support is 100% here, and I'll tell you why. Because I had occasion to meet Dr. Velasquez and Mr. Velasquez several years ago, before I was on city council, right around that time. And I was so impressed because they were the first ones to say something, because I was in therapy for so many years that I could have bought beachfront property in Malibu. But my mental health was so important, and it took about 10 years to get the correct diagnosis, and 2 psychologists and a psychiatrist. And these are weekly meetings at $150 a pop, sometimes twice a week, without insurance coverage. And they're absolutely right about that 10-year window. I mean, I was blessed that nothing really catastrophic, happened, maybe because I was under that care. But I've been there, done that, and they've identified everything. And because of Dr. Velasquez's expertise in the mental health arena, and Mr. Velasquez's experience in the high tech area, they've been able to pinpoint everything right away. Everything is just pitch perfect. And so I, again, have to say, Mr. Mayor, that we're talking apples and oranges. I mean, you can have an apple if you want. You can have an orange. In fact, you can have a salad if you want of the two. But right now, we are discussing something very unique, very effective, and much needed in our community. And I'm coming from a point of being a mental health patient, and when we approach it this way too, when we talk about people who need these services and the way they do it, it's going to be more effective. And the other thing that I really applaud them for is that they're getting away from the stigma. I don't think I could have said this openly 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I just feel so strongly. And that's why Mayor Pro Tem Cassandra Gandara continues to be my hero, because she looks at what we do as a city. And we worry about roads. We worry about these fees. We worry about this. We worry about that. Let's have a park here. Let's have a new building here. And what do we want a new park for? If, you know, a child who's broken or a family that's broken, a human being that's broken, they're not going to enjoy the park. They're not going to see the beautiful trees, the beautiful grass. They're just going to be sitting there wallowing in their sorrow and their mental incapacity, so, or illness. So I think that we have to, we really have to go to the root and really see that we have to help people. And by having people, we're going to have that less recidivism, because it's people who just go back and same behaviors, and we're going to have a productive, happy, and we're considered one of the happiest places on, you know, in the United States. And look at the dire situation we're in. I mean, we know firsthand. So one unhappy person is too many. And I think I've said enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Councilor. I appreciate your comments and sharing with us your journey. I guess let me just go even further then. Now, I don't profess to be an expert in procurement, none at all. But what's concerning to me is the amount of this contract. Okay, so when you take what I was able to decipher at $98,000 a month times 12, that's over $1 million. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's one thing to talk about in generalities about us, hey, this is what I think we should have, and then let's move forward and put out a bid and let other companies bid for this. But I think, in my humble opinion here, and I'll let the attorneys jump in on this, but I think if we start talking about, because this is like theoretically, I'm not, you know, is ready to go. And at that amount, I don't think we should, you know, this, how can I say this? I think, if I remember correctly, the rule state is those who help us design an RFP cannot bid for an RFP. So in some respects, those that are helping us decipher these concerns that you've talked about, and I understand. Like I said, I'm not an expert. And if the council feels that this is what we need to do in this, go in this direction, okay. But I don't think we can go in this direction and just say, okay, here, start doing it. Because I don't think it's gone to bid. To my knowledge, it's never gone to bid. And that's what I'm trying to get at. That's why I'm having this discussion. This has to be, there has to be sunlight put on this, sunshine, whatever you call it. It's got to be transparent here. And I don't think it meets that criteria. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, Mayor Megashima, I totally support and totally respect everything you're saying, because that's exactly what happened at the county. They actually paid that company $50,000 to come in and say something, and then they turn around and hire them without going the RFP. Now, what Peter Goodman said, who graduated, had a perfect LSAT score, graduated probably at the top of his class or near the top from Harvard Law. He, in his column mentioned, because he did address the issue, because everybody was going, wait a minute, where was the RFP? Well, how did the county get around the RFP? Peter said that there was an exception to the RFP. Now, he didn't mention what the exception was to the RFP, but apparently, the powers that be at the county saw that it was kosher. But so I don't know. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with procurement myself. I would have loved for Peter to have said, this is what the RFP, the laws in the state of New Mexico say, here's the exception, and here's how the county was able not only to give a contract to someone, they gave a contract to someone without the RFP to someone that they hired to come to speak to them. If that wasn't weird, I don't know what was, and definitely a questionable, process. And so I don't know, Mayor. I think that we can possibly look at, we can maybe talk to Mr. Macias and find out how he found that there was an exception to the RFP. So.
Well, I appreciate it, Counselor, but that's something I think that either our attorneys or the management team should probably do. I don't know anything about what the county did or does, or just from what I read in the paper, but I'm just,
Yeah.
perhaps management team or lawyers would like to speak out on because it sure seems like this is ready to roll here. And I would love to hear the exception that the city feels that we meet to move forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to talk, David, or either David, Alhan, Maestas, or Jennifer.
Hello, Mayor. David Maestas, interim city manager. There is an exemption for mental health. I don't know the specifics of that, and I don't know what the exemption is called. So unfortunately, I would have to defer to Jennifer Martinez for that, for someone in our legal department. So Jennifer, unfortunately, I'll have to defer to you because I don't know the specifics on an exemption.
You mean Jennifer Vega Brown?
I'm sorry, yes. Sorry, Jennifer
Because
Vega Brown.
Jennifer Martinez tells us about Zeke.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that, Jennifer Martinez. Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Jennifer Vega Brown, if you could assist with that, thank you.
Mayor and Council, this is Jennifer Vega Brown. I will look at it carefully. There is an exception for mental health and for health in general. So I will look at it carefully to see if there is an exemption for this particular service.
Okay,
I want to verify it.
I'm sorry?
I would like to verify it first.
Okay, so then basically what we're all talking about here today is, so you don't see any concern going into details in this presentation other than, or do we stick to just the generalities? You know what I'm trying to get at? I don't want, if what appears to be the best company to do this would then now be disqualified because they're mingling with, or you see what I'm trying to get at. I mean,
Yes.
I just want to make sure this
Mayor.
is fully.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I didn't know if you were directing that to me or Jennifer. Sorry, Jennifer. David Maestas, interim city manager. Yes, Mayor, you're correct. And I did see Jennifer nodding her head. We don't want to discuss any specifics. This is in general terms of what we are looking for, what council would be looking for if we do this type of a service. Because if we do have to go out to bid or RFP, we want to make sure that they still have the potential for RFP bidding if we go that route. Jennifer, I'll defer to you if there was anything different you were going to say to that.
Thank you. This is Jennifer Vega Brown. No, I completely agree with you. If there is any consideration or opportunity to go to bid or RFP, it's inappropriate to discuss the specifics at this point.
Okay. All right. Well, then now I'm going to go ahead and go to council members Bencomo, Gandara, Betastuvi, and Sorg. And I needed to disclose that because if you start going in making this like the greatest thing since sliced bread, then it's over. And then if it has to go to bid, and then what if one thing they don't get the bid, or another company then says, hey, what about us? You guys already showed bias, and it just messes everything up. So that's why I needed to come forward and relay these concerns. So, Councilor Bencomo.
Thanks, Mayor. Definitely threw me for a loop here. I mean, I obviously have a ton of very specific questions. I'll hold off on that till some other point, but I'm curious about then perhaps I don't even know how to frame this up now. I'm curious about how this was not raised the moment we called for a work session a week or 2 weeks ago, so that we wouldn't have to be in this situation now.
Who called for a work session? I put this on the agenda. This was never called for by council. To my knowledge, I specifically put this on here.
Yeah.
Because I had learned about it and I wanted to, and that's why I contacted them, Mr. Velasquez, Dr. Velasquez, Mrs. Velasquez, because I'm like, I don't recall this being a work session item. Typically, something of this magnitude, we discuss it.
Right.
Little things, like the other day, Councilor Sorg needed that 30 by 30 amendment, or a resolution. Yeah, I'll put that on there. I have that ability, the authority. But this, I'm like, I've never seen this. I've never heard it. And I thought, well, maybe I was out of town, or I haven't been out of town. I wish I'd go out of town, but I haven't been out of town. And I'm thinking, well, did I just, is my memory getting bad? I don't remember this. That's why I have this on here so that we can discuss it, and whether or not you want me to reach out to our colleagues in the county and the other communities to see if we want to do this. Because if we do that, now the scope changes, and we can still do this, but now it's more of a different entity. So that's the whole purpose.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I'm glad you said something. I guess obviously I'll hold on my questions, but maybe then what I would like to say now is that our community is in crisis. I mean, in the 7 months that I've been on council, but even before, right, I think it's very clear what our community needs, not just because of the national conversation on public safety and policing, but because even when I spoke with officers, they talk about how frustrated they are, that the majority of their calls are mental health related, or some of these things that are taking time from doing their job at hopefully reducing crime, and particularly violent crime in our communities. So it is very clear that this is something that we absolutely need. And honestly, when push comes to shove, or whatever that saying is, I think it's important that we really take a hard look at what we're willing to invest in and where that money is going to come from. And I know that it's a very scary thought to say, well, that public safety budget is huge, right? And perhaps we need to really look at what public safety means, because I believe that crisis intervention is public safety. And I know that it's a scary thought to saying, let's take away money from a certain department or another. But it's also responsible. It's a responsible and an important thing to do when our community is in crisis, to say, we are going to invest in people who are vulnerable. We care about people who are vulnerable, so we're going to invest in them in a way that isn't just enforcement, in a way that isn't just putting people in jail, in a way that is actually helping people thrive and come out of a bad situation in a much better place. So, at the end of the day, obviously, I wish we were having a different conversation, but if this is a conversation we need to have, then whatever we need to do to push this RFP forward, or however we want to structure it, I think we need to do it immediately, as soon as possible, because there is no need to reinvent any wheels. I mean, the Cahoots program out of Oregon, that program, I was reading a great NPR article about it. Their total yearly cost is about $2.1 million a year. Their entire city police department budget is $70 million a year, and they're saving the city over like $15 million on ER diversions, on sending calls where law enforcement shouldn't be at, where there's other possibilities of who should respond to some of those calls, for both police and fire. And so, I really think that this is the way forward. There shouldn't be a discussion about whether or not it should be the way forward. I think obviously the discussion responsibly should be now who will provide this service. But so I don't know how that happens. I'm still learning, and so however that we can get to a place where we can start actually getting people on the ground responding to crisis calls, then we need to do that.
No, and I appreciate that, Counselor. But what I'm just trying to do is be transparent to the council, because I just barely heard of this a few weeks ago. And that's when I met with them, and then I put it on the agenda for discussion. Now, I don't know if you were aware, but there was a mobile unit a long time ago that the state used to fund. And I don't know if Chief Dominguez is still around. I think he is. But the state, all of a sudden, they just cut off funding, I believe. But I also believe that
It wasn't all of a sudden.
Well, I'm sorry, Mayor Protem. That's what I was going to ask Chief Dominguez, if he could kind of share with us. One, did they use this service? And two, to his knowledge, how did it stop? Chief Dominguez, are you there?
Interim Chief Dominguez for the record. Mayor, I know it was, the service was around. We used it as much as possible. How it became that it just, the service went away, I don't have any direct knowledge of that, sir.
Do you know about when it stopped?
My best guess, sir, would be about 2012.
2012. I thought it was still available like a year ago. No?
No, sir.
I thought the funding had stopped about a year or so ago. Okay. All right. Well, we've got Councilman Como with her comments now. I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Gondeta.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm pretty disappointed this proposal. In fact, and I've in talking about being transparent, I met with David and I said, I continue to hear in this community law enforcement's frustration and concern about them, not only law enforcement, but the fire department addressing mental illness and substance abuse. Having at least a couple of conversations with La Clínica de Familia and Mesilla Valley Hospital that didn't transpire into anything. I said, please let me assist in connecting the city with an individual outfit that I think can help. Thus, I began those conversations with INET-MED because everybody knows I've had a working relationship with INET-MED when I worked at Child Protective Services, and believe in the evidence-based programming that they do provide clients. I've seen firsthand how children and families, as they are moving through a process of being evaluated, sometimes with med management and those kinds of things, how much more positive the family is. And so we've had countless conversations to include with county sheriff, county Macias, county manager Macias. And so what I was told by David Maestas is that it was vetted through finance, procurement, and legal. So to sit here and hear that some of our people are not aware that it's been vetted and that they thought sole source provider was the best way to move this, I'm stunned, actually shocked that this has happened. Because I thought people were doing their work like they were supposed to. And now we're sitting here and can't really talk about details because we might interfere with that procurement process. So I don't know how much more transparent, Mayor, I could have been because I've every step of the way, I informed you and council what the work has been since the inception of having these discussions with not only INET-MED, but with various providers in this community, all to help our law enforcement and fire department.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, earlier, did you just say you provided an executive summary?
Yes, I emailed it to you both. And
okay,
to
so let me just respectfully tell you this.
That's
remember
fine.
their phone call that you called me last week?
I do remember.
Okay, first off, in the newspaper, there was an article and they specifically asked you some comments and you kind of couldn't quite answer them. It was more generalities. And I got the impression you hadn't read the proposal. I even asked you last week, I said, did you read the proposal? Do you remember what you told me?
I said, no, Mayor, I told
you
that very clear.
How can you provide an executive summary if you haven't read the proposal? And
Mayor, can I interject?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
I read the executive proposal and I thought it best not to read the proposal until you all had the proposal. Plus, I didn't know what was happening with the city in terms of any kind of process that our staff was undertaking. I didn't want to be involved in that. And still to this day, I haven't read the proposal.
But you provided an executive summary of it.
That's the executive summary that Dr. Joe and I Med have
Now,
been providing.
I'm not going to deny that you have discussed and talked about the need for moving in various directions for behavioral health, mental health. But Mayor Pro Tem, you never have discussed with me INET Med specifically. Please do not tell me you have, because I have not. This is the first time I got this. I did not get this from the city. Okay? So this is what bothers me here, is that this has not been vetted by a whole council. At least I don't believe so, to the whole council. I guess I could take a roll and ask them, hey, have you read this proposal? I'd like to know, because I like I said, I wanted, this needed to be brought forth to city council. The amount is how we're going to pay for this. Now, granted, if it was all, if council was to say, you know what, we want to do this, this, and this, we go out to bid, organization comes back and says, okay, we can do all this. It's going to cost $1 million. Where are we going to find the money? Hey, you know what? Let's pull it out of the TOSHRO fund. Fine. But this is not how it went. To my knowledge.
Last week when we spoke, I told you if I stepped on your toes, you needed to say that to me. You didn't answer me. So I said, I thought I had been very clear with you and council at the opportunities that I have been presented with in terms of the conversations and this. I was waiting for staff to bring it to us, like a lot of things go. When you made mention, can we put it on the work session? I said, yes, let's do it. So that we could all at the same time hear the proposal.
Well, again, yeah, and we're waiting for the word from Jennifer to find out if this could be sole source, but
Mayor, I guess that's what I'm interjecting, is that I'm shocked and actually very disappointed, because what David Maestas said to me was that it had gone through a process where they were figuring out, like I told you on the phone, it does, what I had to say then doesn't change today. I thought they were doing their due diligence, and I was allowing for that because I don't get involved in that stuff.
Well, and nor do I, and that's why I don't know if there are exceptions. I like I always told every incoming city council member, I always stay away from personnel and procurement. I just do. But I mean, I know a little bit, and it just seemed like this would be a lot to move without any type of request for a proposal. I see David put his hand up. Yes, David.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. David Maestas, Interim City Manager. If I could clarify, staff did do a review, and as noted earlier, and as Jennifer pointed out, and as Councilor Flores had mentioned with County Manager Macias stating that there is an exemption, we were still in the review of that process. I did let Councilor Gandaras know, and I did let Dr. Velasquez know at the time that yes, there is an exemption. So we can continue to look at the execution of the proposal, but we hadn't finished any of that yet. We were still in that process. And then that's when you brought up, Mayor, the fact that you had heard about this and you wanted council to see that. And that's why the work session got set up, so that we could begin this discussion. I apologize if there was any confusion on where we were at in the process, or if I made it seem as though we had gone further than where we were, but we weren't anywhere near actual awarding of a contract at this time. We had discussed that at this point.
I appreciate that, David. And I just got word here that the funding for that mobile crisis ended in June 2019. So the state cut that off. Council Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, was there something you'd like to elaborate on that? I mean, I'm getting this, and I thought it was about a year ago that they cut off funding. Now, whether the state had financial concerns, but I know that had been something that had been funded, and it just recently stopped.
I was very aware because I used the crisis mobile unit that La Clinica provided for a lot of the clients that I work with at CPS. So yes, I was made aware. Okay. And in speaking to the Behavioral Health Division director, there were certain elements to that were required, and what I was told was La Clinica didn't meet those requirements to continue the service. So that for me is neither here nor there, but
Mayor,
well-
can I say a word?
I'm sorry, who is this?
This is David Velasquez from INetMed.
Sir, if I may, there's some council members here that we needed to kind of discuss, and then I'll come back to you, I promise. I just need to,
It's just about that mobile unit from La Clinica.
no, I got you. We'll come
Okay,
back to you on
thank
that. Yes, sir. All right. So let me go to Councilor Beta Stuvey, Councilor Sorg, and then I'll go to you, Mr. Velasquez, Dr. Velasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to change up some of my questions. The only thing that I would like to know, perhaps from our city side at this point, is if we could get the next time we chat about this, the exact numbers of perhaps the mental health calls or behavioral health calls that we respond to, and what those types of statistics look like, and the hours in which are needed to address those issues. I think that would be good for us to have while we're looking at the types of resources that are used for these types of calls. And we obviously do need it. I know when I went on my ride along, we responded to a mental health issue that when we got the call for it, it was for what we thought was, a theft. And it was actually somebody in crises. So we know that there's a lot of different ways that they receive these calls. The rest of my questions are going to have to wait, but thank you to everyone here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sorg.
That was quick. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say a few things. To me, this type of service is badly needed. I think we need to have it. If we need an RFP, fine. If it's sole source, depends on just what legal comes up with, and we got to follow the law. But let's fast track this. Let's accelerate it so we get this kind of service available as soon as possible. In my mind, I really feel that it's clear to me that we're going to save some money doing this, and some of that money, of course, will help pay for the service. That's all I wanted to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. And it sounds like it's all about procedure. That's all. Please just understand.
Yeah, it is. It's all about procedure. Right. Agreed.
Councilor Flores, did you have another comment, or did you forget to put your hand down?
I'm sorry, I have a lot of comments, but I'll keep them to myself right now. I forgot to put my hand down too. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, same. Did you have another comment, or forget to put the hand down?
another comment or two,
Okay.
Mayor. Thank you. Yes, I wanted to hear from Dr. Joe Velasquez about the services that are available in their at their business, more specifically genomics, something that I think is really important, and which is another evidence-based, I think, test, if you will, that helps like she talked earlier about diagnosis, the appropriate diagnosis, and genomics was made mention earlier, but I want people to understand why genomics is so important and why I think we collectively as a community should be doing genomic testing, because I'm not the expert, I know about it, but I would like to hear more so that people understand what is it and why it's important, Mayor.
Okay, and if I may, Mayor Pro Tem, before Dr. Velasquez, I think the other Dr. Velasquez wanted to say something about the Crisis Mobile real quick, and then I guess his spouse.
Yes, this is David Velasquez from INetMed. Just to, me being an engineer, I do a lot of research. That's what we do. I was part of a lithium-ion battery group back in '92, so I have multiple patents in that technology. But we do research as an engineer, and I did research in this town, from the county, from the city. I got documents both from the county and city. The mobile crisis unit you were talking about by La Clinica was funded by Mary Kay Papin. She got money, $2.8 million for 4 years. That contract ends this September, $700,000 a year. Now, they're still kind of doing mobile crisis unit, but for their patients only. The people and the personnel they have right now currently cannot admit somebody. If they're suicidal, they cannot admit somebody into inpatient care because of the level of credentialing they have. They don't have this specific credentialing. So that's why that mobile unit's being phased out for the city, because now they're just taking care of their patients. The first year, when they got this $2.8 million contract or grant, they did 19 patients. So take $700,000 divided by 19. That's a pretty healthy salary.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Doctor. I appreciate that. And then I guess Dr. Joe, as Mayor Pro Tem asked some questions, if she could share with us. I forgot the name, what she was saying, but I think she heard.
Yes, I did. It was this is Dr. Joe Velasquez. This is a question about answer to Councilor Mayor Pro Tem's question regarding pharmacogenomics. Feeling a little rusty because since the pandemic, we haven't been able to carry out that lab, but we do use it very, very frequently. Typically, we have a lab tech on site. We do, actually, we ended up having, we were able to have a lab tech on site because we do such a high number of these particular studies. So really what they are in a nutshell is we're going to look at the genetics of the liver enzyme functions of an individual. So if you think of it just like highways, we have Highway 70, we have Highway 25, and then some major thoroughfares. We have Telshore, we have Loman, and so all of those different streets and highways give us a mechanism to get from one location, location A, to location B. So same concept for metabolics, just the breaking down of a particular agent or pharmacoagent, which would be a medication. So some of us have a pathway that runs at 60 miles an hour. And so some of us have like limits. So we're going to try to drive I-25, but we cannot exceed 25 miles an hour going to I-25. Well, that's going to be problematic. That's too slow. And if it's too slow, it's going to back things up. And if you back things up, you're going to get high in going back to pharmacology, or in our case, psychopharmacology, you're going to get a buildup of medications. And then on the other side, if you're going really fast, you're going to see a lot of dumping of a medication. So we just want to know about the metabolic pathways of the liver and how it breaks down medication. So that helps me know, as a prescribing psychologist or anybody practicing psychopharmacology, whether it be nurse practitioner or psychiatrist, it helps us know how fast that individual might be moving or how they might be breaking down, metabolizing an agent. Now, some of the scuttlebutt in our field is, the science isn't there, it's not there. We need to be a little more conservative and not use it, not use it for everyone. But boy, does it come in helpful. I'm going back to how I met Mayor Pro Tem Gandara in CYFD. So we have some of these children come to us, and we do not know their history. We don't tend to know their genetics. We don't know their genetic history. We don't even know a lot of times their family history. And so it's very, very helpful to understand how this child, because a lot of times I'm going to pick a med. If I've got a 10-year-old little girl and she has pediatric bipolar illness, but I don't really know about birth mother, and CYFD professionals don't have a lot of history on birth mother because they actually were in the care of birth father, and he was the one that lost custody of the children to CYFD. So now it's just getting really convoluted. Typically, if I know birth mother and I know she did really well on Abilify, then chances are this little girl, 10 years old, pediatric bipolar illness, is going to do really, really well on Abilify. But if I don't have that kind of information, then pharmacogenomics really helps me understand, hey, if I use Abilify, how is that liver enzyme pathway going to work in this child? Is this child going to dump that med real fast, meaning I have to use higher dosing? Or is this child going to move that med through their system really slowly, which means they're going to build up the med and I can use lower dosing because I don't want them to be overdosed. So it really helps us kind of gauge. It gives us a little bit more information. Well, actually, I think a lot more information. I have seen it in my chronic, going back to recidivism and really complex cases. I had this one gal, lovely gal, graduated master's level out of NMSU, and she had been on that journey that Counselor Flores, and oh my gosh, Counselor Flores, what courage. You moved my heart today. Thank you so much for being so very courageous. And absolutely, we got to break down the stigma. That's enough. So many of us suffer from these disorders, and we're just not being real about it. Thank you so very much for that. Going back to this beautiful gal at NMSU, a master's level individual, and she had been on this long journey of 10 years trying so hard to get a hold of what was happening in her depression. And she had been on and failed at least a dozen medications through the years. So since high school, she'd just been struggling so bad. But it was the pharmacogenomic study that showed there were only two. Now, she didn't have bipolar depression. She had a major depressive illness. But people were thinking, the providers were thinking maybe bipolar illness because she just wasn't getting better. And that's bipolar illness for you. It's very resistant. It's very hard. It's hard to treat and hard to stabilize. Well, come to find out from the pharmacogenomic study, there was only two roads that would take us to a level mood. Two. Out of other people, they get to choose between 22 different agents for an antidepressant type effect, 22 different ways to get there. And it's easy. I mean, we have a really good chance of hitting it. But this gal genetically had two roads. And those two particular meds were very expensive. They're new, they're kind of boutique agents. And it was with that pharmacogenomic study and her history of having been through so many meds that allowed me to crack the code us to crack the code. And she is now off. She got picked up for a big job in another country. And she's a valuable asset, to all of us. So it's a really good story of how pharmacogenomics really helps us in diagnosing and treating.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. I appreciate that. I just want people to understand that I think there's a protocol for behavioral health, psychologists, psychiatrists. It helps us, to diagnose people on the onset. That's why I think this crisis intervention model is so important, and why I believe reimagining police and what they're going out on. And Mayor, you made mention the call center. We have a call center. It's MRVDA, right? Where all the 911 calls go. But if you ask the kinds of questions to ensure that this crisis unit goes out to the and be the first contact rather than the last, it's going to save all of us a lot of money. And we should be concerned about the $1 million or whatever it's going to cost. But I also feel like, for me, why it's been so important is our law enforcement officers and our fire are very frustrated. They're overwhelmed. They're inundated with calls that they don't need to be inundated with. We pay them to do a type of service, and they should be doing that. And I don't think we understand, if you're not in the business. Dr. Joe can recite anecdotally example after example of the numerous calls that law enforcement, because she's met with them other times, they will tell you just what they're encountering out in the field. And just while we've been on COVID, we have had at least 5 major shootings, some murders, some deaths, and those are from with young 18, 19-year-olds. And I often hear Councilor Becomo in my ear, like, what happened? When those things happen, we fail as a community. If we got them earlier on, at the first point of contact and linked and referred them to wraparound services, psychiatric services, we would be better off as a community, making sure that people got the services they needed. So, Mayor, with your question about the behavioral health district, I'm all for that. I think this is a larger vision, obviously, involving our colleagues in the other small municipalities in our county. I just want for people to understand, the public to understand, and members of council and you, Mayor, that I work very collaboratively with people. Again, when you hear the over 1,500 super users that today and day after day, monthly, that our law enforcement officers, our CIT people, our staff are working on when they don't need to be. And so timing for me is very, very important. And I'd like to ask the question to Mr. Maestas in terms of a time frame. What can we be assured is our next steps? Because our staff is inundated, and not just law enforcement, not just fire, museums, library, other folks are having to address that, and they may not be prepared for it. And so I want to get at least some timeframes that we can work on, because this, for me, at least phase 1 should happen sooner than later, and that's what I'd like to advocate today. Thank you, Mayor.
And Mayor Pro Tem, with all due respect, I don't want you to think that because I'm earlier I just made a comment to Councilor Swart. It's about the procedure. I think what has been laid out sounds fantastic and much needed, and would love to do it, but we're dealing with public funds, Mayor Pro Tem, and I know you know that. I understand. So there's a procedure. Now, if you were writing this out of your own pocket, go ahead, but we're not. We're using public funds, and the procedure has to be done correctly. That's all I'm calling into question. You heard earlier that the city attorney says there may be some exceptions, and she's going to check it out. You heard earlier, David said they're in the process, but it's not been concluded. That's all. I mean, gosh, yes, everything that's been said is fantastic, but it's all about the procedure.
I understand that, Mayor, and of course I want to be a good steward of the public funds. I've always been 100% for that, absolutely. Disappointed in staff, and I'll say that very clearly to you. I'm disappointed because we've had numerous conversations, and when you brought up the work session issue, someone should have said, we are still navigating this, we're not ready. Can you give us some time? That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Vasquez, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I know how hard you work at bringing some of these resources to our community, and what an advocate you are. And I know in past conversations with Dr. Velasquez and her team, had just really been impressed at just the level of professionalism that her firm brings. I know they've been involved in discussions in the past with the county surrounding the Crisis Triage Center, and with me as a city councilor when I first came on board. And I definitely see that desire to serve our community. and with the credentials that they have and the innovative model that they have, I think we're lucky that they are continuing to carry on this hard work that's oftentimes overlooked. You know, not everybody wants to do this type of work. It's hard to have mental health professionals really in the field, I think, today, but also in our community with such a shortage. Mental health professionals could go just about anywhere because there's such a huge demand for their services at this point. I did see the executive summary that you sent along, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate that. Ms. White, I didn't get a chance to speak with you. I know you wanted to talk perhaps about this before the meeting, so I apologize for not being able to meet with you, but agree with following the procedure, but also agree with the importance of this for our community. You know, these are the types of things that is going to make Las Cruces stand out from other communities, especially in the face of this, not just the pandemic, but it's really, you know, this crisis has done so much to so many people in terms of the impacts on their mental health. And it's going to continue. We're going to have some long-term effects resonating from, you know, the type of trauma that people have faced in the last couple of months, to unemployment, to, you know, for some people, loss of their homes, right? And for some others, just the domestic issues that they're having inside their homes. All those things, I know, both they lead to some of these deeper issues that people experience in their community that then end up, if not treated, being, you know, they turn into things that we don't want to see in our community. So I just want to say I fully support moving forward on this as quickly as we can, given the right appropriate channels, but also want to just give Mayor Pro Tem a shout out because I know you've worked really hard at this for so many years. And when we actually have a project to implement on the ground, that you know, it's our responsibility to make sure that things like that go forward. And so I'm glad that we're all in agreement on that. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the staff at INET Med for your presentation. Thank you for your investment in the city, and Ms. Mary White, thank you as well for being such an advocate for this. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you, Councilor Vasquez, and to Dr. Velasquez and your team. I think you've heard. I think the best thing to do is to let staff determine the viability of whether or not it can be sole source. They'll come back with a response here in the next week or two, and then we'll take it from there. But I have to tell you, I mean, setting aside the procedure part of it and the things that you've discussed, I mean, I'm no expert, but it sure sounds very, very impressive, very promising, and as was mentioned, something that's much needed. So we're going to leave it at that. Okay, so for the most part, that pretty much concludes our work session. So I'm just going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor and City Council, excuse me?
Yes.
It's Joe Velasquez. I just want to thank you all so very much for this opportunity to present the proposal and to be a part of a very important process for this community. Thank you all so very much.
No, thank you, and thank you for all that you all have done in the community in the past, as well as the future things to do, and help so many people. So thank you and your team. Okay, so yes, Councilor Sorg.
Did Mary White have more to say? Did she get?
I don't know. She didn't have her hand up.
Yeah, she doesn't understand how to do that, maybe.
No, she's had it up before.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
I do have my hand up.
I don't see it. Okay, well, you can go ahead and talk, Mary.
Okay, just a final comment is that to add to the fact that we need this is that we are in a pandemic. We know that the high suicide rate, mental illness, alcoholism, all of those are symptoms of the larger problem. And what is the larger problem? It's poverty in New Mexico. Poverty is the cause and the core. And so to the extent that we can treat symptoms, we should do that. We also want to remember that we human beings create poverty. We create it one decision at a time. Our institutions create it, and our corporations create it. And we can also take the opportunity to be the solutions, and that's what I see the city taking the opportunity to do now. Just as with the fees for housing, those decisions create or alleviate poverty in New Mexico. So a lower income house, 150,000. If you can help a family create individual wealth, that's how we help New Mexico get out of poverty. Giving a local corporation a contract is how we help alleviate poverty in New Mexico. Bringing in an out-of-state corporation, yes, that we have many of them and we thank them. They do a lot of good work. But to the extent that we have the talent, let's depend on New Mexico corporations and let's hire people from New Mexico. Things are only going to get worse under the pandemic, so we will see more mental health issues. So thank you all so kindly for all your efforts. Mayor, thank you in particular, and Mayor Pro Tem Gondara.
I appreciate those comments, Mary. Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Flores.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Sorek, second by Councilor Flores. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, those opposed? We're adjourned. I'm going to still stay on, and Christine, I got to do the agenda setting meeting, so we'll see you all later. So, Councilor Flores, you're taking off, right, for a while?
Yes, yes, for a while. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Safe travels.
Yeah.
Don't tell when you're coming back, because we don't want anyone messing with your house.
Oh, no, I actually, my other son is here and his boyfriend.
They're gonna take care of it.
Yeah, and then, my ferocious little Edie.
Oh, okay. I was afraid that, okay.
We have security cameras and all that.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your good.
Safe travels.
Thank you for your good wishes. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, Mayor, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, this is the agenda setting meeting for the August 17th, 2020 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent.
Number 2, non-consent.
2 non-consent.
Number 3, consent.
3 consent.
Number 4, let me just read the title. A resolution approving an employment agreement for Ifo Pili as city manager and amending the city's fiscal year 2021 budget. Non-consent.
Non-consent. Number 4.
Number 5, non-consent.
5 non-consent.
6, consent.
6 consent.
7, consent.
7 consent.
8, consent.
8 consent.
9, consent.
9 consent.
10, consent.
10 consent.
11, non-consent.
11 non-consent.
12, consent.
12 consent.
13, non-consent.
13 non-consent.
14, non-consent.
14 non-consent.
15, non-consent.
15 non-consent.
16, non-consent.
16 non-consent.
17, non-consent.
17 non-consent.
18, non-consent.
18 non-consent.
19, non-consent.
19 non-consent.
20, non-consent.
20 non-consent.
21, non-consent.
21 non-consent.
22, non-consent.
22 non-consent.
23, non-consent.
23 non-consent.
24, non-consent.
24 non-consent.
25, non-consent.
25 non-consent.
26, non-consent.
26 non-consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all later.
Bye. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.